I'd like to call to order regular council meeting number 1537 for April 27th. And in honor of the Tsleil-Waututh, the Village of Pemberton acknowledges that we are meeting within the unceded territory of the Tsleil-Waututh Nation. This meeting of council is being held virtually with all meeting participants attending via electronic communications to adhere to the PHO orders respecting physical distancing. Council members will be involved in and participate in the meeting virtually as they would in person. For members of the public in attendance, please note that this meeting is a live webinar and is being recorded. And the recording of the meeting will be available on the village's website following the meeting. Council members attending the meeting are required to verbally advise the chair of when they leave the meeting and return to the meeting so that this can be recorded in the minutes of the meeting. For clarity, if a council member does not verbally advise the chair, but is observed to be absent from their video feed for an extended period of time and their video feed remains turned on, the council member will be marked absent from the meeting until such time as staff observes the council member to reappear in the video. Members of the public who wish to ask questions during open question period at the end of the meeting will be able to do so, and I will provide instructions at the time. We have one amendment to the agenda to remove the item on 7628 7 o'clock drive. Are there any other amendments? Seeing none, can I get a motion to approve the agenda as amended? Councillor Noble, seconded by Councillor Craddock. Discussion. Any opposed? Motion carries. Adoption of minutes from regular council meeting 1536 from April 13th. Moved by Councillor Noble, seconded by Councillor Zant. Discussion. Any opposed? Motion carries. Any business arising? Seeing none, we have no rise with the report or cow or committee minutes. So we will go right to our delegation. I'll let Ms. Kennedy get them set up.
We have, Gwendolyn, we have Chief Grossman and Mike Hamilton is no longer with us.
I noticed that. I'm just having a little trouble, I think, with the connection here. Just one moment.
Take your time.
We seem to have lost Mike Hamilton.
I'll bring him back in a moment.
I think he's dropped off the attending list.
Oh.
Inspector Dijkstra, is he there?
We may have to wait for Corporal Hamilton to rejoin.
In the meantime, good morning, Sergeant Banks. Welcome.
Good morning. Thank you so much for Mayor and Council for having me. We can get started.
Sorry. So did you want to get started? Or did you want to see if we can connect Mike and
I think Michael, I'm doing the majority of the presentation. So Mike will be joining, but I think he may be just trying to get it up and running. He was having problems with his Wi-Fi this morning. Right. So just hopefully he'll pop back in as needed. And
what about Inspector Dijkstra? Is he joining us?
He won't be joining. He's next door. He won't be joining us currently for the presentation, but I can introduce you to him at the end. So that's absolutely no problem. He just kind of wants us to wrap up this year, and then he'll come in at the end to introduce himself, and you guys can ask him questions if need be.
Sounds great. Well then, thanks for joining us, and I'll turn it right over to you then.
Absolutely. So for those of you who actually haven't met me, I think most of you would have met me last year when we came up with Inspector Triance, but I'm Sergeant Sasha Banks. I'm the acting staff sergeant for the North Zone. That includes Pemberton and Whistler. I have been in this role probably since January, since Staff Sergeant Paul Hayes left and was commissioned to the Lower Mainland. So I understand I may be a little shorter on time than I had hoped. I know that Sheena had was going to get me to ask to see if we could have a few more minutes other than the 15 set minutes, just to make sure that I give you guys enough time to ask any questions that you may need to ask. I'm just checking on Mike's. There we go. So if I go over that 15-minute mark, is that all right for today? Perfect. So I'm just going to share my screen here so that I can bring up the presentation. It's a lengthy presentation of which normally takes me about 45 minutes. So you at least have it if you choose to. I will whiz through it as quickly as I possibly can. I won't be taking 45 minutes. So just note that that's not going to be what I'll go into too much. So.
Morning, Corporal Hamilton.
Perfect. So this is just going to be our year-end presentation, obviously, for the Pemberton RCMP. It's going to have a little bit of an overview of our strategic plan, as well as some of our crime stats that we were seeing for the year 2020. So that being January to December of 2020. And then a little bit of a viewpoint going forward for the rest of 2021 and sort of what we have been seeing for this year so far. So this is just going to give you a little bit of an overview of what we are looking at in this presentation. So the strategic plan, just some of the guiding principles, operational context and challenges, the Sea to Sky, because we are an integrated area, that being Bowen Island, Squamish, Whistler, and Pemberton, under the command of Inspector Robert Dykstra, who's our new inspector, and then the statistics for 2020 and going forward into 2021. I try and put lots of pictures in my presentations. This is a picture of part of the search for Marshall Awasa that we had going on this year. And it's one of the members that was up in that area doing some biking as it's a very difficult landscape to get to. So this just gives you a bit of an idea. It's changed a little bit from probably last year's team leaders that you saw for the Pemberton group. So obviously just this week, Inspector Robert Dykstra has joined us from Nunavut. He is the new OIC that's in charge of the Sea to Sky, including Pemberton. Obviously, he fills some pretty big shoes with Inspector Triance. We all miss her greatly, and it's been a hard loss for us, but we're super excited to have Inspector Dykstra with us. So myself being the acting staff sergeant in charge of the North Zone, including Pemberton, and then obviously your NCO in Pemberton is Corporal Mike Hamilton, of which all of you know quite well. He will be leaving us soon, so we'll talk a little bit about that coming up. And then obviously your general investigation section, Sergeant Jeff Shore, your outreach team, which is Corporal Nathan Miller, and the admin manager, Amanda Daly, and your office manager in the North Zone is being Chandra Hovde. So I know that we went over a bit of this last year when we did the presentation, but of those of you who maybe haven't seen it, or for the public who is unaware of our strategic plan process, we work on a 2-year strategic plan, having input from all over the Sea to Sky to create a very comprehensive overview of what we feel the Sea to Sky RCMP, including the needs of our communities, such as Pemberton, in that whole strategic plan process. So we look at our partners, our stakeholders, community members, and council, mayor, and those who are within our local governments, including that of the Village of Pemberton. So the plan for 2019 to 2021 is obviously wrapping up for us. Our fiscal year in the RCMP goes until the end of March. So we will be starting a new strategic plan for April of 2021 going into March of 2023. It is a 2-year plan that we will be going forward with, and that should be up and running for the next time that we present to the Village of Pemberton for our strategic plan. So this plan is supported by various mediums, including communication strategies. I am the communication strategist, the senior one for the Sea to Sky. Part of my role as well is I'm a media relations officer. And so we use our communication strategies such as our Twitter, Facebook, and our media releases, being on radio, this type of forum, where we try and talk to the public about what we're doing and how we're doing it, and making sure that we have that availability, particularly during these COVID times. We report on the strategic plan on a quarterly basis through RCMP programs, as well as we do it on provincial guidelines, such as doing this presentation. So some of our guiding principles that we have are these. I won't go into depth because I know that we have very limited time, but I think it's important to note that we do have some operational contexts and challenges, including the area of Pemberton, just the ever-changing population due to the tourist influx. We have rapidly growing communities. We have COVID-19 is obviously definitely something with our public health orders that have changed for us this year and last year. And I think we also need to take into account that mental wellness and that safety of our team and those who are in the community that live in it, that come to it, that vacation in it. That's something that's very important to us as well. So I believe that most of you have had a copy of this or have seen something similar to it. This is just a, sort of a moniker, a very brief overview about what our strategic plan looks like. It comes in these 4 pillars. It has initiatives that belong to it. And then within these initiatives, someone owns it and reports on it. It keeps us accountable to these new innovative ideas that we're presenting, that we're looking at. These are not necessarily tend to be things that we do well every day that we're already doing. These kind of foster that innovation and that new ideas. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't, but we think it's really important that we change this on a yearly basis or even sometimes every 6 months to try and make sure that we're moving forward and we're keeping up to date with what our communities need, as well as the dynamics that change when it comes to policing. So we have those 4 pillars that you saw in that strategic plan: the crime reduction, the road safety, the community outreach and engagement, and Indigenous people. And we also have the 4th one of investing in our people. So the first pillar that we're going to talk about is crime reduction. These 2 photos on here, obviously, as you know, Mike Hamilton, your corporal up there, he is extremely skilled in doing drug investigations. He is an absolute asset to your community, no doubt. And these are just some evidence that he had seized off 2 drug files that he was participant with his team up there in stopping those coming up into your area and continuing on. So when you look at the strategic plan for crime reduction for the last couple of years, so this is going to be an overview of what we've already done and how we're wrapping that up. We talk about it in usually 3 facets. So the enforcement, the education and prevention, and then we talk about it in youth. There was many of these over the COVID year that were either stifled or are being pushed just because we're unable to do a lot of that community engagement product or that youth engagement or some of that more proactive things that we like to do that we've been unable to do. So in the enforcement, we talk about increased intelligence-led policing. We talk about a Sea to Sky community response unit going into areas, and Corporal Mike Hamilton has been sort of the creator of this. He's the champion. This is something that he was heavily involved in, going in with very trained people to try and identify those who may be coming into our areas, and sort of going after that to try and see if we can identify what they're doing and how they're doing it. We're creating these prolific social chronic offender databases. These things are already up and running. And then operational planning for major events, which has definitely been decreased over the last 18 months. We also looked at education and prevention for our team. So hosting a lot more training in the Sea to Sky corridor, as you can read down there, as well as partnerships that we have, including the cannabis teams for trying to address any cannabis issues that are identified within our area, including that of Pemberton. Youth, a lot of this was, like I said, during COVID, a lot of it has decreased. We did create an online safety presentation that we worked with School District 48 called It's a No, and this video was created by Corporal Nathan Miller and his team. And it's more about making healthy choices. It's a presentation that's given in regards to sexting and those type of issues that tend to arise in that middle school and high school age group. And we're trying to increase our presence within the schools. We did go into the schools this year to do some community presentations. Myself, Corporal Hamilton and Corporal Miller did go in this year, but it's been limited. So our role was to try and get out there where the youth are. So doing ski patrols in Whistler, a lot of snowmobile patrols in Pemberton area, and boat patrols, trying to engage not only with youth, but the community as a whole. So we talk about road safety. This is just a picture of an accident that was actually happened in Whistler. It's a motorcycle accident, but quite relevant to the Pemberton community, given the increase in motorcycles in the area and a number of fatal collisions that we did have over the summer. So the enforcement aspect of this is documenting traffic enforcement and required minimums by members, seasonal policing initiatives with our partners, including being on the boats, the bikes, the ATVs, and the snowmobiles. This is something that we heavily focused on during the year of 2020. This is part of my project and my substantive position as being the sergeant in charge of the Sea to Sky when it comes to those operational and administrative aspects. So we worked a lot with conservation, fisheries, the NROs, BC Parks, to try and make sure in both the north and the south zone, because a lot of people are coming up that south zone area to coming into the north, and as well, obviously coming up from the Lillooet area. So we worked a lot in conjunction with them to make sure we had a cohesive model when it came to those hot weekends. In the summertime, the May long weekend, the July long weekend, and the August long weekend. And we were also, I know that Corporal Hamilton worked on this a lot, increasing the enforcement for motorcycle safety heading up into the Duffy area and through Pemberton and south of Pemberton as well. So the development, we're looking at the increase in serious and fatal motor vehicle incidents. We're trying to sort of tackle this coming season by the messaging, the roadways, and the traffic enforcement that we're looking at. And you can see that education and prevention is yet again training of members. We did do a number of this. Obviously, our training has been put on hold a lot with the RCMP over the last year. But we tried as hard as we could to work with ICBC and increase that messaging of where we're going to be over the weekends and what we're going to be doing. A lot of these, like I said, are delayed. This is just a picture that you see here of tire checks that we did have going up into the corridor. These were a lot of when the winter tire season began, and these were put on multiple locations throughout Highway 99, including north of Whistler going into Pemberton. So community engagement and Indigenous people, another one of our pillars. This is just a picture of Orange Shirt Day. This happened all along. The Sea to Sky members were provided with these orange shirts representing a project with the Indigenous people within our areas. So we talk about this as being something that's very important to us in the Sea to Sky, of that engagement and combining that with how that would look with enforcement, as well as sort of that education of our teams. So we talk about those proactive patrols, those boat patrols up at Anderson Lake. The boat patrols are definitely something that's going to be on our coming schedule for the summer, and was on for the last number of years. We talk about the increase in Sea to Sky traffic services coming into our area, as well as URSU, the Integrated Road Safety Unit. The open houses were canceled. We were looking at hosting a Cops for Cancer event to support our local riders. We do know that this was stopped last year, given COVID, but we do have a local rider for 2021 for the Cops for Cancer. It's Constable Jessica Muha out of Whistler. And she's been riding up into the Pemberton area on a regular basis, as she did last week. So we're going to be supporting her in her venture. So the development, we talk about this Whistler Community Engagement Team, which is part of Corporal Nathan Miller's Whistler Outreach Team. He staffed a domestic violence sexual assault investigator in April of 2020. It's Constable Bev Baker, and she also works on providing that skill set and that subject matter expert opinion and oversight and investigative skills to those larger cases that we're seeing in Pemberton, and we have done over the past year. Just talks about restorative justice and work with Whistler Community Services for vulnerable groups in the Whistler area. This, I think, is a big one, and you guys would have seen this come out. So it's the community consultative group for the strategic plan survey for 2021 going into 2023. We sent out some surveys and it should have gone up to the village of Pemberton as well, where you were able to have that input on the strategic plan coming up. We obviously knew that we couldn't meet in person, but we needed to come up with something that engaged the public, our stakeholders, and our partners to be able to have that input as to what they want their policing to look like in their areas in the coming years. And note that if something needs to change or something comes up that Pemberton thinks is important, it definitely can be added in. This is an active document that continually changes, it's fluid, and it can have things added and changed on it if need be. So we talk about education, just increasing our Indigenous experiences and Garage 529 events. And the youth, yet again, we talk about those healthy relationships presentations and the increase in school attendance by the membership. This picture down here is Constable Rinke in a boat. I believe he's on Anderson Lake there. And that's, he's very passionate about that and will continue to do that throughout the summer. This is our last pillar, investing in our people. We'll try and whiz through this as I know I'm running a bit short on time already. Just talking about performance management and recognition, employee health and wellness. There's a picture of the unconscious bias. This is something that we chose to take on to provide to our membership and to our employees, just given the current climate that we had been seeing over the past 18 months. And it was a great opportunity for our members to at least have access to that type of training. It was a mandatory course that they took online through Ascension, which is an American company. This is just yet again more on resourcing, education and training. It's a picture of our members taking crevasse training. We know that in Pemberton over the last number of years, there's been some serious backcountry incidents that included some deaths, unfortunate deaths, and incidents in crevasses. And it was important that we were able to teach our members who have those skill sets already in the backcountry about what this looks like and how to be safe in those areas if they needed to attend. So these are just some highlights from 2020, 2021. So in crime reduction, like I said, we talked about that domestic violence investigator. We talk about the COVID-19 enforcement and support patrols. For road safety, we talk about the increased presence on Highway 99 up into the Duffy. Increased planned seasonal presence in the backcountry with partner agencies, the winter tire checks, the motorcycle focused enforcement. The community outreach engagement is our new memorandum of understanding with Statlingham Tribal Police. It's completed. We're just awaiting our final signatures. Pemberton RCMP obviously works very closely with Statlingham Tribal. Investing in our people. I think the biggest thing that would be is the continuation of the seasonal focus training for police, making sure that your police officers are representing what's going on in your area so that they're trained in their sleds, their avalanche training, their crevasse training, and we're about to come up with a bike training course in the next few weeks. And our membership, obviously, we received our COVID vaccination. So our team had to have that, which was definitely a big relief, I think, for our membership, as well as being able to provide that service to your community where our members aren't fearing for their own safety when it comes to COVID. This is just a couple highlight photographs of things that we've been doing. Obviously, the online crime reporting came into place. I thought that little picture was funny where that's Corporal Hamilton and Corporal Witzke. Somebody posted it on the internet where they're out doing their snowmobile patrols in your area. And obviously somebody was not super happy that we were there. But I think it's a great presence to have in that backcountry. You see some of the parking issues that have come across at Joffrey Lake, as well as the use of Constable Scarecrow. Definitely something that we like to use in that area. So let's go transition, unless anybody has any questions. I know I'm going super quickly, but there's a lot of details on here. So if we have any questions about that before we head into the crime stats, I can take those now.
Why don't we go through all of your presentation?
Perfect.
Thanks.
So the crime stats, we can go through them pretty quick. If you guys need to have any specific questions about these, we can. And then Corporal Hamilton's on the line and he can talk about those if you have any questions about the details of those. You can read that's the scoring changes, same thing as last year. So I think the biggest thing we're sort of seeing with the crime stats when it comes to the Sea to Sky and it comes to the province and the country anyways, is you are seeing quite a large percentage of decrease in particular areas. And we tend to be seeing an increase in areas such as assaults, domestic violence. You have a decrease in harassment, which is something that we've seen an increase in most areas. So I think that's a positive thing that you're seeing that 28% decrease in harassment files. But I think obviously your biggest change is you have an increase in domestic violence. This is something that we're seeing across the board. I'm not a criminologist, but my only assessment of something like that would be that just due to COVID in 2020, there's a lot more people who are within homes and just sort of that increasing stress levels. We are seeing an increase in domestic violence across the board in the Sea to Sky, and that includes Pemberton as well. Obviously, your kidnappings, I think that's always the big one that ends up being brought up in our world. That actually It counts as something that's called a forcible confinement. So if an offense such as a domestic violence incident includes somebody being held and not being able to leave, that would be included in the charge standard for that. So don't be alarmed that that's gone from a 0 to a 2. We looked at the majority of these cases and they are domestic violence related. So when it comes to property crime, you're seeing the majority of it is a decrease across the board. You are seeing an increase for mischief to property, so 33 cases to 48. That's a 45% increase, so that would be your largest increase. And that possession of stolen property has gone from 0 to 6. Obviously, that would be a 600% increase, but a lot of these end up dealing with, you know, when we're locating individuals, such as the files that you saw in that crime reduction, if there's stolen property in that, or if someone is in possession of a stolen vehicle, those would be the type of charges that you would see coming up for that. And your break and enter to businesses, you've gone from a 4 to a 5, so that's showing a 25% increase. But I think one of you're having a decrease in frauds in the area, which is fantastic to see. That tends to be something that over this past year, we've seen increases in other communities. And you're also seeing a decrease in your theft unders. Your drug possession stats, you're down across the board. Obviously, cannabis would be not relevant anymore, but you're seeing a decrease across the board. My only assumption would be on this is that you are just having less people in your area, and with less people in your area, there's the supply and demand just decreases. So your drug trafficking is staying the same at 6, and I know that Corporal Hamilton works hard on that aspect. So this is just other criminal stats. So you're just looking on this. I think what the biggest thing to note is that you're intoxicated in a public place has decreased quite substantially to a decrease of 35%. And that as we are yet again seeing across the board in most communities, including Whistler and Squamish, this year mental health cases are increasing 14%, and this is definitely the trend for 2021 as well. This is definitely something that we've looked at and how we can address this effectively going forward in communities that maybe don't have a strong mental health and addictions program with their health units, but it's definitely something that we're coming into dealing with a lot more often. I think when you look at your traffic safety, you're really down across the board for traffic safety, except for collisions with damage over $10,000. And collisions with damage under $10,000. There's a bit of a change in the scoring of this, which is why you're not seeing statistics from 2016 to 2018. There was no doubt that there was a lot of sort of media and public interest in some of the major collisions that were happening around the community of Pemberton, particularly obviously on the highways, and that's a lot of where you're seeing that type of statistics come in. But you have a major decrease in impaired operation of a motor vehicle. So you're having going from 80 to 39, a 51% decrease in that. And yet again, I would equate that to having less people within your area. This is just giving you an overall. So I think you're down across the board on everything. In violent crime, property crime, everything is decreased. Your calls for service actually only decreased by 12% in Whistler from 2019 to 2020. We would have expected this to have decreased a lot more with the amount of decrease in people in the areas, but we saw this in Whistler as well. And actually Squamish is up for calls for service, just given, I think, the people that were coming into the backcountry that you may not have seen them in the community, but they were in other areas that we were able to address. Sort of this is a going forward for 2021. We have our new strategic plan, obviously the arrival of Inspector Dykstra and our increase in partnership work, increase in seasonal focused policing, the increase in the Whistler Community Engagement Team, which will mean some additional, hopefully some additional resources for the provincial back areas within Pemberton, and our adaptation to new COVID measures and the environment as 2021 continues, including those travel restrictions of which we're still waiting to get some word on what that actually means to us, and supporting Constable Muha in her 2021 Cops for Cancer ride. And that is my speedy, as quickly as I could get through that.
All done. Thank you very much. Just wait for you to move your
I will
stuff.
stop sharing.
Thank you so much, Sergeant. That was a great presentation. A lot of detail in there. I'm sure we all have questions. Maybe I'll just start with one and then open it up and get a whole bunch. Just with regards to the number of motorcycle accidents and just number of volume of motorcycle riders that were on the highway last year, and I suspect will be much the same, if not more, this year. And you mentioned in your presentation that there's work being done to try to improve the safety, but I'm wondering if you could just give me a little more detail or what thoughts are around in terms of, I mean, obviously we have limited resources for RCMP, but in terms of speed patrol, in terms of managing, a lot of people come up onto the Duffy Lake. Sea to Sky is a great highway to ride for a motorcycle, but it's fairly wide. A lot come up and then hit the Duffy and they're not used to that sort of terrain. And before that, as you know, before they even get onto the Duffy, just on the lake road itself, the curves down there. So I'm just wondering if there's signage, education, what else might be happening along that regards, so we don't see the same amount of incidents as last year.
Sure, I'd be happy to speak to that if that's all right.
Perfect.
You.
Yeah, so last year we actually have an unmarked police truck, which I'm sure we've all seen on Facebook a few times, but it proves very valuable for motorcyclists because they're so agile and so fast. They're actually fairly hard to catch. And I'd say about 20% of them actually flee from the police, especially when we're going the opposite direction. We have to turn around, they take off. But with this unmarked pickup truck, I think I towed about 15 of them last year for street racing and excessive speed, just in the Pemberton area alone, mainly on the Duffy. So that was very valuable. And that picture of the motorcyclist that crashed, I came across that just south of Whistler. And the guy was actually, he didn't have a helmet on. He had a religious headwear on instead. And yeah, I came up to him and he was laying against the concrete abutment and his motorcycle was literally 100 meters away on fire in the middle of the road. So, there's a lot of trauma for first responders as well as people, just regular people coming across these scenes. And I feel pretty passionate about, all the members in Pemberton only have a few years service and they've already been to multiple fatalities with motorcycles. So I understand what you're saying, Mike, and we're pretty passionate about it. So we're going to increase our overtime this year. Last year, we got the RCMP helicopter to help us out for 2 days. They can video and tell us where the guys go if they do take off. That was extremely useful. And so with overtime, air services, and a dedication, we're fairly committed to having a better season, a better summer than last year.
Right. And in terms of the road, Mike, in general, and Sergeant Banks, you mentioned in your presentation in terms of coordinating with the province in terms of the traffic that we see on the highway, what is the communication with parks or, when you're dealing with the volume of traffic and the overflow, the overcapacity that we saw in provincial parks and on FSRs and all that sort of thing, as I think we all could agree, that's way too much for the RCMP to manage that kind of volume as well as all the other duties you perform. How have you found the communication and the collaboration with BC Parks? Are there and beyond, Flynn Row, MOTI? How has that gone for you? Are there gaps? And is there anything that we could help fill if there are gaps in terms of that communication? Because as we know, it's been the theme for the last years, just starting with Joffrey Lakes, but now it's no longer just a Joffrey Lakes thing, especially after last summer and what I anticipate we'll see again this summer, which is all over the Lower Mainland in our neighborhood. So I just want to know how that collaboration looks for you guys and if you need any support on that.
So I can talk a little bit about the political part of it, and then I'll let Mike talk about sort of the implementation of that. So when it comes to the work with BC Parks, I think they're great, but they are strapped for resources in a particular particular areas, right? About what they're going to do outside of their park area. So we do try and work on those seasonal policing plans with them, but note that those are only for those big ticket weekends when we're looking at those planning. So you're only looking at those July, August, May long type weekends. When we're seeing those type of volumes of traffic come up every weekend, including a number of weekends ago, where all over social media, you were seeing people up in that Inchuck area, and that's where they're going. They don't want to be visible in Pemberton. They don't want to be visual in Whistler. They are going into areas where they think they're not going to be seen, where they can do what they want to do. When it comes to your support, I think there's no doubt that we need to increase the provincial resources within our area. We need to increase that provincial budgets when you're looking at that backcountry type enforcement. We did work extensively last year in those areas to kind of garner the stats of what we're seeing back there, and are we needed there a lot more? Yeah, I do think that we're needed there a lot more. Conservation is spending a ton of time back there, and they need our support to be there. There's firearms offenses that are going on back there. There's the fishing, wildlife, there's environmental implications to all of that. And is that going to, we had been seeing this rise over the last number of years, but COVID has been the catalyst of sort of taking it to the next level of what we're seeing back there. And I think with these travel restrictions where you're pretty much compiling 3.5 million people or 4 million people into being either able to go into the Upper Fraser Valley or coming up into our area, you're going to see that volume of traffic. And how we deal with it, I think is still to be seen. We're going to try, and I think the biggest part for us is to get back there and to try and gain that intelligence and try and be able to monitor what's going on and record it. And address it as far as we can, and then be able to use that going forward with the support of your council and your community. And I think that's probably, it's not reassuring to not know what's going to happen. And I think we're well aware of that, but it's, you look at just everywhere, right? And it's not Pemberton specific. You're talking about Whistler, and you're talking about Squamish, and you're talking about these backcountry areas and these increased search and rescue calls. And we saw it over the winter where people were going back there that maybe didn't have those experiences to be able to handle those backcountry, and even people who were experienced, but they're going into areas and they're pushing themselves into places where they get themselves into trouble. And I think our search and rescue stats speak for themselves when it comes to that. So I'm in the midst of writing a business case to try and increase that budget for that backcountry policing, whether it'll be successful or not, but obviously the support from the village would be something that would be definitely an addition to that, and hopefully help push that forward. When it comes to,
let us know if you need support on that for sure.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Sorry to interrupt. Let us know if you need support on that for sure. Because
Absolutely. And I think when it comes to the enforcement aspects, we will be providing Corporal Hamilton and his team with that overtime budget, hopefully a cross combination of work with Sea to Sky Traffic, bringing URSU into the area, and hopefully being able to draw on those RCMP resources that come with our agency. So that would be my sort of political spin of it, and then Mike will talk a little bit more about that enforcement.
Yeah, so to answer your question, it's been a bit challenging working with different organizations. I think you were alluding to that. It's not a negative experience, it's just challenging. There seems to be some disconnect. We tried hard to get a couple new signs put up on the Duffy, maybe even drastic signs to say how many serious collisions there were every year, just something to hopefully change people's behavior. This morning I received an email from BC Parks asking for a presence up at Joffre on May long weekend. They said they don't have anyone available because their rangers are all on training that weekend. So we'll be up there, but it's difficult to be everywhere, because May long we also have to be at Anderson Lake, hopefully on the water, the Inchuck at Twin One, Strawberry Point, Birkenhead. So we're doing what we can, but it's difficult to work with the different organizations, to be honest. It's possible, but it's challenging.
I mean, I get it too. Like all areas of the province. I mean, we're all strapped for cash and resources, but it seems rather odd that they're off on a training on the May long weekend. I won't question their logic on that. I've got more questions, but let me open it up. I'm taking too much airtime. Questions from council? Anybody else want to? Councillor Craddock and then Councillor Antonelli.
Yeah, good morning, Mr. Hamilton. Nice to have you here and appreciate the presentation from Acting Staff Sergeant Banks. The question I have about the motorcycle incidents is on the highway. Do you have any opportunity to bring uniformed officers in on motorcycles to maybe travel that highway and see if that's not an area that we can help slow things down?
Yes, we do have that opportunity, and that did happen more than once last summer. They did come up in motorcycles, and it was very successful. But that's a great, that's a great point, and that's one of the things we will definitely do this summer.
That's great, because I'm a rider and I find that what people do, like Mayor Richmond said, they ride quickly from Vancouver up to Whistler, but once you get past Whistler and head up the Duffy over, they're not prepared for the type of corners and the type of occasionally material that's on the road, and they go way too fast. I've been past so many times in that road. It's incredible. So any support you need on that aspect, I'm sure council would certainly be behind you on it. Thanks for that.
Thank you.
Councillor Antonelli.
Yeah, I know other parks have community groups that support them, you know, like Friends of Golden Ears Provincial Park, that kind of thing. I'm wondering if at Joffrey Park there is a similar group, if speaking to people who come to park alongside the road would be well outside their scope, or it could be something that might work well.
It's a great idea.
Okay. Any other questions or thoughts? Okay, I got a couple more then. Mike, as you know, there's been a couple of cases of vandalism around town lately. We know we've got some youth with some pent-up energy these days, understandably, with COVID. I just, you know, there's a lot of concern and discussion in the community right now about some of the vandalism and a few incidents that have happened lately. I just don't know if you want to speak to that at all.
Yes, definitely. That's one of the Staff Sergeant Banks pointed out. Mischief, which is the destruction of property, essentially, has gone up a lot in Pemberton, and that was mainly due to around the one mile nature center, which is, I think, is what you're getting at in Pemberton.
Yeah.
And also there was one time a few months ago where a particular youth damaged about 6 or 7 vehicles, kicked the side mirrors off. We figured out who that was with some help from community members, and he was arrested, and he's using extrajudicial sort of community-based rehabilitation, so it doesn't get in the way of future careers, his interests. So that's good. That, I think that it ended. He was a Whistler gentleman. But we are doing foot patrols at 1 Mile Lake and Nature Center, especially. It's been brought to my attention that is now, it seems to be a big issue in town, and we are taking that seriously. There was something on Friday night, Constable Rodway went, but unfortunately the youth had gone by the time he got there. So it's on our radar, and we're committed to that. We don't want to see anybody get hurt or the destruction of property. Yeah,
I mean, it's a tough one. There's, in a small town, there's already, one could say, a lack of things to do for adolescents. And under these circumstances, it's even tighter for kids. So again, there's a lot of pent up energy, but there have been, and I you know, a lot of it's anecdotal. Some might be exaggerated, some might not be, but there's a lot of accounts of kids late in the evening finding somewhere to do something because they've got nothing else to do anywhere else. If that makes any sense. So there's roaming teenagers, and I get it. And again, on many levels, but it's of concern for a lot of people.
Yeah, and we are out there on Friday and Saturday nights, and I've done it myself, approaching groups of roaming teenagers and just chatting with them, and, you know, making sure that they're respecting their community, because that's what it is. And they're, for the most part, good. I just think it's really difficult to be a teenager these days. You can't go into anyone's house, and
Yeah.
that's not an excuse for damaging property, but
Yeah.
I think that's what it is.
But I think it's also, now that you mentioned that too, I think it's also creating a bit of a difficult dynamic, Mike, in the sense that, like, I appreciate that you guys are out, chatting with them. And I hope that's what it is, obviously, is a chat with the teenagers as they're out and about. Because 9% of them are just looking for something to do and they're not up to any mischief. But I have heard, what teenagers can be like, and I hear different accounts of how they're spoken to, and those stories get blown up. And I feel like the RCMPU guys and in years past have done a really good job trying to be present with our youth on the street, and and make them feel comfortable. But I feel this new dynamic, because of the lack of anything else to do, because these kids are out roaming out and about, and there's a different kind of interaction going on with the RCMP. So I do have concerns over that. I don't want to hear the stories coming out of teenagers that, and I'm not even saying they're factual, but I still don't want to hear those sorts of stories where people, we were out and we were just at McDonald's and the cops came and they kicked us out, and okay, really? What was the real story? But I'm just saying, because you guys are being forced to deal with that a little bit, it's must be very tricky for you. And I think it's a dynamic we need to pay attention to. Yeah,
and I appreciate that. And if you ever hear somebody say that with is their son or daughter, and they can absolutely feel free to come here or phone me, and I'll talk to the officer, and we'll make sure that those interactions are positive.
Cool. I appreciate that, because it goes a long way. We don't have that many youth, and the stories travel very quickly. And I don't want to go back to a place where our youth feel that there's any sort of mistrust towards the RCMP. Obviously, you guys have worked hard to develop that relationship. So I think
yeah, then we've had it where the youth come in on their own, actually, and we sit down with the police officer that dealt with them. And I'm in the room if they want, and their parents are there, and we've had a couple of good talks, and in the end, it's worked out well.
And I even heard that too from some of the kids. When those mirrors got kicked off on the cars and that vandalism was done, I coached the high schools, and it was some of the kids were going, we can give you names, or we can find you names, and there was a lot of teenagers that were upset because they were all getting branded as mischievous, roaming teenagers all around town every night. And that was what people were starting to go. And so a lot of the kids that I know were wanting to out, if they didn't already know the kid, find out who the ones that did the damage and out those kids, because they did not want to get branded in the same light as those kids. So I think and that's where I say, I think most of the kids here in our community, like anywhere, are awesome. I think they're all awesome. Some of them are just a little, struggling. But most of them want a comfortable relationship when you guys pop by the skate park or whatever it is. That's what they would prefer as well. But there's a few that are making it difficult. So anyway, I can go on about that. It looks like Inspector Dykstra has joined us. Welcome, Inspector Dykstra. It's a pleasure to meet you. Welcome to the best part of the Sea to Sky corridor. You're going to want to spend most of your time up here with us. I know it. And I'll turn it over to you to introduce yourselves. We can go quickly around our table if you like. My name's Mike Richmond. I'm the mayor of Pemberton. And I will just let our council quickly introduce themselves and turn it over to you if that's all right.
Thanks. Sounds good.
Councillor Antonelli, why don't you start?
Yeah, my name's Amika Antonelli, and this is my first term.
That's that. Yeah.
Yes, hello, Ryan Zant. It's also my first term. Happy to be living in Pemberton, and I'm happy for the work that you guys do, and thank you for being officers.
Councillor Noble.
I'm Leah Noble, and I'm also a first-term counselor and a longtime resident here. And I appreciate the work you guys are doing.
Councillor Craddock.
The oldest to the last. Welcome to our community in the corridor, and I'm in my 5th term on council.
And we also have on staff Ms. Kennedy, who's our staff support today, and Ms. Fraser. Would you like to introduce yourself as well? You guys have probably met.
Not yet, but I'm Sheena Fraser. I'm the manager of corporate and legislative services, and this week I'm acting CAO. But we do work closely with our CMP in our capacity with bylaw services, and have been really grateful for the support that we've received. So, and welcome to the corridor.
So yeah, welcome, Inspector Dijkstra. I'll turn it over to you for a few words.
Sure. I'm not going to take too much of your time. I mean, my name's Robert. You can refer to me as such, please. Just arrived here last week and just getting my feet settled, getting into the house and starting to learn the area. So I'm looking forward to meeting and working with you all very much. Heard a lot of great things about Pemberton. We'll get to drive through it on our way through. It's a beautiful community. And again, I'm hoping I can get to meet all of you at some point here in the near future and work with you with any issues and concerns you might have.
Thank you, sir. A question, I don't know if it's for yourself at this point, as you're still stepping into your role, or Mike, if you want to take it, but there sure was a lot of police activity on the roads on Saturday in particular. I didn't notice on Sunday, but there was a lot of activity in Pemberton, and I'm wondering, and people were all wondering, if that was an increased presence due to the restrictions, sending a message perhaps to visitors that were still coming up that they might want to reconsider, or was it a planned sort of enforcement activity? But every time I went through town on Saturday, there was at least 4 people pulled over. I don't know how many I saw. So I'm just wondering if that was a planned thing, or that was sort of in reaction to, increasing presence in reaction to the restrictions from Minister Farnworth.
Right. I'm actually going to let Sasha take this one because I'm still getting my feet wet, but hand that over.
Perfect. Sorry, I wanted you to at least get to meet him, that you had a chance to put a face to a name. So I think when it comes to those, we didn't have any additional direction from Minister Farnsworth in regards to those travel bans per se. But the beauty about being an RCMP, having RCMP as your policing structure within Pemberton, is that you get to have those integrated road safety units as well as the Sea to Sky traffic units that do sort of these, I guess, area blitzes to an extent where they're coming up into our area. And we'll see a lot more of that type of support going forward on the weekends, where they'll be in our area, and they'll be in Pemberton and they'll be up on the highways. I know that Corporal Hamilton and myself have expressed over and over again about the need for that support, that we can't be everywhere all at one time, and that for them to come up here definitely sends that sort of message to the public that we're there, and then it's time to slow down. The hope is that support continues, and we'll be keeping an eye on that. We won't be letting you know that they're coming, but just so that it's a surprise factor as well. But we welcome their support anytime they come up here, and as much as they can get up here would be in all of our benefit. But I'm glad that you saw them out, and I'll make sure to send that message along.
Oh, we saw them out, and there was a lot of discussion. It's not a big downtown, as you know, so when you see them pulled over all the way along, it's pretty impressive.
I follow that Sea to Sky road conditions often. We're out at where we are on those road conditions, but yeah. I think even that messaging helps if it's known by the public that we're out there and that we're doing stuff, and that's a definite focus for us. Those are not enforcement measures to look at those public health orders. Those are enforcement measures because of the volume of people that are coming up here. They are not public health order blitzes, which is something that we have seen where the public is talking a lot about that's our direction when we're doing things like that. Our direction is to be enforcing the Motor Vehicle Act, to enforce the criminal code. The public health orders are purely a tool in our toolkit of what we can do. But the majority of our stuff out there is to make sure that people are being safe on those highways. And if we end up talking to them and they end up telling us that they're from somewhere that they're not supposed to be, then we know how to deal with that. Our guys have, in the North Zone alone in the last year, or since October, in Whistler alone, they've given $70,000 worth of public health order fines out, and Pemberton has given some of those out as well. We know how to do those, but those are not our primary focus when we're out there.
Well, as you know, up and down the corridor, we signed on to a letter, Squamish, Worcester, Pemberton, et cetera, to, in light of COVID, ask for more seasonal policing budget or an increase to the seasonal policing budget for this year. So again, that's another potential coordinated advocacy. That's something, just listening to your presentation today, watching Mike and his crew over the summers, it's you guys need more resources during those high seasons. It can't just be expected on the May long weekend or the July long weekend. That's ridiculous, because almost every weekend is going to look like a long weekend. So we put that letter together to request more seasonal policing resources, and anything else we could do in that regard, please let us know.
Perfect, thank you. I think we've kind of gone from 0 to 1,000 in 12 months. So it's hard to play that catch-up game of where we need to focus our attentions on. But we're getting there. We're gathering that intelligence and making sure we align our resources to that.
Perfect. Councillor Skelly?
Yeah, thank you. Just one final comment about the motorcycles in Duffy Lake. The road up there doesn't have any shoulders. So a lot of the problem, I think, comes from the fact that a lot of gravel gets pulled back onto the road by people pulling trailers and cutting corners that are very sharp up there. I'm just wondering if a suggestion might be to work with MOTI to see if they could do a little bit more sweeping on the roads occasionally, because I know that causes a lot of problem on the road. So just a comment, thanks.
Councillor Zant, go ahead.
Yeah, just sorry, one other comment I wanted to say with the comments for the blitz that you had this weekend. I thought it was well placed right along the road for the elementary school. I find on the weekends there's a lot of people that forget that that's still a playground zone, and they speed through there on a regular basis. So I thought that was well placed by your staff to have the cruisers monitoring that area over the weekend. Thank you.
Okay, any other last thoughts? Great, well, thank you to both of you very much for being here. We look forward to the updates, and I think it's really important for us to hear from you and from you to hear from us. So I very much appreciate your time, and we very much appreciate your work, as you've heard. And so please let us know if there's anything we could do to support. We know you guys are busy, and so we're happy to partner where necessary. But actually, one last question. Sergeant Banks, you dropped a bit of a bomb there and you haven't spoken to it. Mike, where are you going?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Where are you going?
I can't get too specific on this call, but it's to the Okanagan, and I'd love to tell you in person. And yeah, I don't want to go, but the RCMP deemed Pemberton a 4-year maximum spot. So we have to leave, unfortunately. So yeah, you'll be in good hands.
We've already succession planned that. So the corporal coming up is Corporal Scott Langtree. He will be filling the very big shoes of Mike. He is a Pemberton resident, has been in the area for many, 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 many years. When we do that succession planning of when Mike is never allowed to leave, we will make sure to keep you guys informed of how that looks, and make sure that Scott has afforded you the time to have a conversation with him about what the plan for the next number of years looks like going forward.
And when do we see that happening? The transfer?
That's up to the box in the lower left for me, I think.
Okay, well,
I feel like I'm on Hollywood Squares a bit, right? So
okay, well, look forward to talking to you some more about it then. Take care, you guys. Thank you very much for joining us. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Find it tough. We get really good RCMP officers here, and then they get moved along because our area is always, we've seen it so often during the years, and they get used to our community, they get to know our community and the way we operate, and move along because they have to. So we're bringing Mr. Chalmers and Ms. Pedrini in right now.
Mayor Richmond.
Yeah.
Just to that vein, in that vein, can mayor and council or the CAO advocate to change that rule within the RCMP? Because obviously it's an RCMP policy, but
They would
Based-
have to change the designation of Pemberton, like Pemberton's designation,
Right.
which would be, I'm not saying it's impossible. It would be a big move for them to change their policy. We'd have to put a pretty compelling case together. But when I do chat with Mike, I could ask him what that looks like. I could ask him that question, but
Yeah.
I think it would be a tough sell, quite honestly.
Okay.
Is Miss Pedrini on the phone? Is she with us as well? Can we get going?
You can proceed, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so we are on to 9A, 9A1. This is the development variance permit for number 129 for 1368 Fernwood Drive. And I will turn it over to Mr. Chalmers, I take it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good morning, council. Yes, as the mayor outlined, this application is for consideration of issuance of development variance permit number 129 for 1368 Fernwood Drive. Council has some familiarity with this site and this matter. The development variance permit has been submitted as part of the condition satisfaction for a proposed 3-lot plus remainder subdivision at the terminus of the existing Fernwood Drive. Just by way of history, when the applicants made application, there was a couple of options for securing and providing access that were considered. One was to create a Bearland Strata Road, which would not have to meet municipal standards, to provide access to the proposed lots. The challenging thing with that is that there is one property beyond, and the approving officer has an obligation through a subdivision process to ensure that there's access to lands beyond. So because the adjacent property did not wish to be part of a strata complex or a Bearland Strata at this point, the only remaining option was to pursue a fee simple road to provide access. So in discussions with the applicant and through the subdivision process, the question emerged whether or not this road was more akin to a hillside road standard or the municipal standard. As council's aware, for projects on the hillside, most notably Sunstone, there's been a series of development variance permits is granted to enable a varied road width. And part of the rationale for that is that it minimizes the amount of cutting and filling. It enables a little more response to topography. So in working with the applicant, staff and the approving officer did issue a tentative approval letter with a proposed road variance, and it is subject to the variance. Or if the variance is not granted, the applicant has the ability to proceed with a municipal standard road. So as council knows, this has been before you several times, originally in May of 2020. Council referred it back to staff with a number of questions about how the road would function and impacts and those sorts of things. Staff did subsequently provide a report on December 8th, 2020, which modified the variance, removing one of the requested house setback variances, limiting it only to the roadway itself. And at that meeting, council refused the application, but immediately afterwards invited the applicant to reapply. So that was under the development variance permit application number 124. The applicant did petition council to waive the mandatory 1-year waiting period for a reapplication. Council granted that, and they resubmitted an application in February of 2021. In terms of the substance of the application, it is identical to what was proposed in development variance permit 124. So the right-of-way width of the road, that's not the paved portion, but the amount of road allowance would be reduced from 18 meters to 15 meters, or a variance of about 3 meters. The asphalt width or the carriageway from 8.1 to 7.5 meters. The lane width from 3.3 to 3, and the ditch width from 3.6 to 2.0 meters. So again, these align quite closely with other hillside development standards that have been approved in the community. They are also probably more typical of a lot of local roads in other communities in terms of scale and width. So to that end, staff were supportive of the proposal to minimize some of the road width for the Fernwood extension. Staff do have a number of comments in dealing with council's concerns and issues with matters that requiring additional information. We did discuss that with the applicant, and there's several updates there. A lot of the comments and questions that council has raised are absolutely legitimate and proper concerns about what may happen in the future. But staff would like to remind council that this is in the context of a subdivision approvals process. So at this stage, I've provided on the report a copy of the tentative approval letter, which outlines all of the conditions. This is really the first condition that needs to be satisfied because it will set the stage for many others. So the applicants are looking today for a decision from council whether or not they will be permitted to build to an alternate road standard or they have to build to a permanent road standard. And one of the things you'll see attached in the applicant letter is that it to get into the level of detailed design that was contemplated at the December 8th meeting and get engineering drawings done at this stage for something that's not certain is kind of out of sequence with the rest of the subdivision process. Normally what happens, and particularly in this case, we've advised the applicants that the variance should be the first step, and that will allow them, that will give them the kind of the recipe book for what they send their engineers away to design. That exercise is quite costly. The quote that they provided us from their engineer, which is in, if not below market, is between $50,000 and $80,000 to do the detailed engineering design. So they've elected obviously not to pursue that until they have some certainty about which standard they're designing the road to. In that process, there are a number of other bylaw triggers and requirements. So in varying certain sections of the subdivision and development control bylaw, I just want to be abundantly clear that those are the only sections that get varied. It does not vary the requirement to provide adequate snow clearing. It does not change the ability for the engineering and improving officer to require this road to be built to a functional standard. So matters of snow clearing and parking will be taken into consideration absolutely as it moves forward. One of the comments from December 8th as well was on-site parking on one of the lots in particular. Again, in a subdivision process, a detailed site plan is not a typical requirement. And it's challenging to bind a future lot to an exact build. But again, the zoning bylaw is absolutely clear that a building permit will not be issued and the land cannot be built on unless it demonstrates an adequate amount of parking on site. If there is concern about off-site or on-street parking, that is something that council has the ability to control. You could issue parking restrictions if you chose, if it became a problem in the future. And that's what staff would recommend at this point. So in summary, staff maintain that the application is consistent with the other hillside development standards. It's a more fitting standard for an extension of the Fernwood Drive as it exists, because it will be a continuation of an existing road, which is far below standard. There is still ongoing discussion about the extent to which Fernwood may have to be resurfaced. We do not anticipate, given the scale of this project and the topography in the area, any significant modifications to Fernwood Drive that would bring it close to the bylaw standard. So really the question before council today is the extension of Fernwood Drive. If council wishes to see a modified standard, it can approve the development variance permit or authorize its issuance. And if they wish to advise the applicant that they have to design the road to a municipal standard, then that would be, I would recommend that council refuse the application. The recommendation as we put forward is intended to give council some, to the degree with which it's in council's realm in the subdivision process, to give council some certainty that the matters that they've raised in the past will be specifically identified and addressed through the remainder of the process. So as outlined in the report on page 23 of 131, the staff recommendation is that the development variance permit be authorized for issuance, that the council request the building inspector ensure full compliance with on-site and visitor parking for each future building permit within the subdivision, and the council requests the approving officer and village engineers consider provision of adequate snow clearing, provision of adequate drainage, off-site improvements to the existing portion of Fernwood Drive, and whether on-street parking should be limited or restricted. So the intent of the recommendation is to provide council hopefully some certainty that the issues that have been raised, which are again legitimate issues, will be specifically identified and captured by the approving authorities for building permit and subdivision later in the process when that detailed information is appropriate. So with that, Mr. Mayor, I'd be open to any questions you may have. I believe the applicant was intending to speak today, so should council, after any questions, it would be appropriate to hear from the applicant and then the public. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chalmers. Yeah, no, we'll start by opening it for questions from council, and then we'll hear from the applicant if they wish, and any public comments. And then I'll look to council for comment, but we'll start with questions. So just to quickly, you know, in the recommendation, when you speak to addressing the concerns of council around snow clearing and that, in consideration of the final subdivision application, like, I just, for clarity, what specific points do we ensure that snow clearing and drainage are taken care of? The setbacks they've taken off the table, so that was one of council's concerns. That's no longer there. Parking you've mentioned, but snow storage, snow clearing, and drainage seem to be sort of three of the biggest issues. So exactly at what point in the process would that get insured? And how does that go?
So, Mr. Mayor, through you, I'll refer you to the tentative approval letter in specifically section 6 of that. In a subdivision process like this, what has to happen is that before the approving officer considers approval of the subdivision, the applicants must go through a detailed engineering design. In an instance like this, we would anticipate a formal servicing agreement with the village, which includes the detailed drawings, a security held by the municipality in the amount of 120% of the estimated construction costs of the water, sewer, sanitary, roads, drainage. All of the engineering that's required to make a subdivision work must be proven out to the satisfaction of the approving officer, who in reality relies on the village's consulting engineers and operations department to advise whether it's acceptable. So at that stage, before the approving officer will even look at final approval, engineering and operations would need to be satisfied that all of the considerations in your subdivision development control bylaw have been satisfied. And in this case, they would be asked to provide specific or give specific regard to matters of parking, snow clearing, drainage, and the things outlined in the resolution. So that typically is one of the last pieces to come together, because the preparation of engineering drawings is very costly. And again, this is a fairly minor and relatively straightforward subdivision, but the cost of the engineering is such that normally developers, and if members of the public, as in this case, are doing an application, we advise that they should leave that to the end. Kind of work through the most discretionary through to the least discretionary parts of the TAL requirements before they start expending those funds. But certainly no lot will be created and no construction would be authorized to start until it has been designed in accordance with the bylaw.
Thank you. So I'll open it again. Please, let's stick to questions and not comments at this point. Councillor Craddock, go ahead.
Following up on your comment, Mayor Richmond, the concern I had under the recommendations, but I think Mr. Chalmers may have cleared it up. Under your third and that, two words that concern me were request and consider. They don't seem to be very enforcing resolutions, but you've explained now that that'll come at a later date. So those two words concern me a lot, but I think you've cleared that up. The other question I have, and with the plans that have been submitted, I'm still having a little bit of concern understanding how much work is going to be done on the access on Fernwood.
Mayor Richmond, through you, as to the first question, the wording is very deliberative because the approving officer acts independently of council. And we have to be careful that council does not try to exert authority over the approving officer in making a subdivision decision. It's the way the provincial legislation is written. It's certainly not unique to Pemberton. So certainly council can choose wording that they find more appropriate. It's not common in a subdivision context for council to provide any comment. So this is again a little bit out of the ordinary, but given the appropriateness of council's concerns and the degree to which they were of concern to council, we felt it was appropriate in this case for council to at least advise the approving officer. From that, when we get into the detailed engineering design, there's a couple of considerations that will have to be taken that will drive the extent to which the existing portion of Fernwood is upgraded or refinished. Part of it will have to do with a more detailed analysis of the existing services that lie under that existing portion of Fernwood. So for example, if the water line or the sanitary line needs significant improvements to provide service to this subdivision, and the road has to be affected to replace those lines or to upgrade those lines, that would command a different level of refinishing of the existing portion of Fernwood. There's been talk, and there's reference, I believe, in the TAL to the approving officer considering in the future through the engineering design what needs to be done. What we don't believe is appropriate at this time, and what has not been required by the approving officer, is a full-scale rebuild of Fernwood Drive as an offsite improvement. Again, subdivision servicing obligations are somewhat limited in scope. It's not like a rezoning where we can ask for any manner of improvement. The approving officer could certainly ask for that road to be rebuilt to provide adequate access. That's within their purview. But we're looking at the limitations, the topographic limitations, and the character of Fernwood. It's unlikely that that would ever be achieved to a bylaw standard. So the short answer to your question, Mr. Craddock, is that at this point, we do not know exactly what needs to be done to provide services to this lot, and those will likely inform the extent to which the existing portion of Fernwood has to be refinished or rebuilt.
Thank you, Mr. Chalmers.
Any other questions from council? Okay, seeing no more questions, I'm going to invite the applicant and the opportunity to speak to the application. Ms. Kennedy, will you set us up?
Good morning, everyone.
Good
Can you hear
morning.
me?
Morning.
Sure can, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time to hear this application again. Cameron has probably covered off 90% of what I planned to say today. So just bear with me in terms of repeating some of the comments he did make. But we heard your request from the previous two meetings regarding, wanting more information on certain aspects of the development. And so we did approach the civil engineer to request, that information. And we were just told that it's not possible, that you'd have to give some assurances or give you the information that you require, would require doing the engineering, which would be, like Cameron said, the letter they gave us was between 50 and 85 is what they told me, or wrote in their email to me. And they explained that there's a reason why, they do this variance at the beginning. Is just because the level of detailed engineering isn't done till all the discretionary approvals are received. And all the issues that council raised will be addressed and in that subdivision approval process. And so that's it just takes that much work to come to the answers that you were, on the questions that you were asking. The issue before you is the width of the road. There's many challenges that have to be overcome to receive the subdivision approval. If you took a look at the TAL that we received, there's a laundry list of things that have to be done before the subdivision approval is even considered. So this is just a tiny, tiny, tiny step in the very long process. And it doesn't mean that the subdivision approval will be granted by any means. The road variances, as Cameron pointed out, aren't unique. They're not extreme. They're in keeping with the roadside development, hillside development recommendations that the village has. The reduced width is reasonable given the area that it'll service and it's a more responsible way of utilizing the land and reducing the amount of cutting and it feel that has to happen in such a small area. A full standard road isn't really reasonable given the road isn't a connecting road. It doesn't go anywhere. It dead ends into the servicing of these 5 homes. Miles and I live in Pemberton. We're full-time residents and we aren't big city developers. Our goal is to provide respectful infill housing. The proposed lots are comparable to others in the area, and the lots, they're within walking distance of the village, which is obviously a plus to anybody that lives in the village. It's not a big development. We're working within the topography of the lot. It's an acre of land, but it's got some challenges in terms of the topography. Putting this road in will allow for the removal of the easement to the neighbor that crosses through our property to get to their property, and they'll have free unencumbered access to their lot. They won't have to be going through somebody else's lot. It's definitely a benefit for them. In the proposed kind of sketches and development that were done by the engineer, they identified potential areas where snow removal and snow storage could happen. The biggest thing is that we'll now have a proper turnaround for any of the village's service vehicles when they're moving snow around. Also, a big plus will be for emergency access. And most of all, this is a small project and it doesn't change the character of the neighborhood. It'll be exactly the same development that's everywhere in this part of the neighborhood. So again, I asked you to consider granting the variance approval. If you have any other questions?
Thank you. Thank you so much. Is there anyone in the public that would like to speak? If you do wish to provide comment on the proposed development variance permit, please click the raise hand feature in the webinar controls. That'll notify staff that you would like to ask a question, and they will announce your name when it is your turn, and we will unmute your microphone. Is there anybody from the public that would like to comment on the application? I'll call a second time. And I'll call a third time for public comment.
There are no raised hands, Mayor Richmond.
Thank you, Ms. Kennedy. In that case, I will open the table up for discussion. Any other questions, or we're open for comments from council? Okay, I'll start. I feel this is a good example of potential infill and development and gentle densification. I feel like we talk about our housing issues and how, to alleviate the pressures on our limited housing market. And one of the things that comes up is infill development, developing our current urban areas, gentle densification. And I think this is a pretty good example of it. And whenever you do that, there are going to be impacts and potentially exceptions needed. I think, having been up there for the amount of traffic, that the variance for the road width is an appropriate one for that topography. It means less impact to the actual landscape potentially. And I think it suits a hillside development like that. I think you go into a lot of neighborhoods and you find smaller roads that lead to 3, 4 properties and tie them together. So I feel that that is all appropriate. And I'm confident that our approving officer will deal with the issues that council has laid out regarding snow clearing, snow storage, and drainage. Drainage is really the biggest one for me, just considering the variance of the ditch width. So I'm going to make sure that drainage is appropriately taken care of. But I do have confidence in the approving officer doing that on our behalf. So at this point, my mind is open and I'm prepared to support the variance as I feel that the road width is appropriate for that neighborhood. Councillor Scott, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Just one last question to Mr. Chalmers. Is this going to end up being a strata, or is this going to be individual private lots?
Mayor Richmond, through you, the Bearland strata is not an option because of the need to provide access to the lands beyond. The one lot that would be at the end of the road that the applicant was advising currently gains access by easement. The only way for them to be to receive access through a strata would be to be part of the strata, and they've declined. So these would be fee simple lots with a public roadway.
So then just to continue on what Mayor Richmond said, it will be up to the village of Pemberton to do the snow removal and clearing in that area. Is that correct?
That's correct. And that will be regardless of whether or not the road standard is varied. Yes.
So the only way that we would not have to do that is if it was a strata. Is that correct?
That's correct. Mayor Richmond, I will conclude by saying I think for all parties involved, the strata would have been a preferred option. It does not require the same municipal standards. It is not something that the village becomes accountable for, but in this case, there was really no viable way of doing it with that other party choosing and rightfully choosing to not be part of a Bearland strata at this time.
So just one last follow-up, if I might, Mayor Richmond. And again, I'm looking at the area, the turnaround area. Is there sufficient room for two things, fire trucks and snow plows to turn around in that crescent then?
Mayor Richmond, through you, the applicants have not requested a variance to that, so they will have to provide appropriate turnarounds to the satisfaction of engineering and the fire department, operations in the fire department, yes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chalmers.
Further comments from council? I've got Councillor Antonelli, then Councillor Noble.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I think infill development so close to the village core is a really great idea too. And I think that this property has amazing potential for two parcels that will be really comfortable for the entire neighborhood. I think in the previous two applications, we heard from the neighbors and they brought up concerns, and I still have those concerns and they haven't been addressed. From my perspective, variances are supposed to address some kind of hardship, but there's no hardship here. I think two lots could fit here very easily, very comfortably. There'd be plenty of room for snow storage, drainage, parking, that kind of thing. So I'm not going to support this. I feel like when we consult with the community, we really have to address their concerns. I think supporting a variance that some of the neighbors have expressed concerns for, and that not having been addressed isn't something I'm going to do. So I'll just leave it at that.
Ms. Noble?
Yes, I'm a big supporter of infill housing. And I think most of the concerns have been addressed, or it appears that they will be addressed by the process as it unfolds. And if there's no further questions, I'd like to move recommendation 1.
You're on mute.
Sorry, let me just get back to my agenda. So just for everybody's and for the public knowledge, you did recommendation 1, Councillor Noble, that is that council
Yes.
approves development variance permit 129 for 1368 Fernwood. And that council requests the building inspector ensure full compliance with on-site visitor parking for each future building permit within the proposed subdivision. And that council requests the approving officer and the village engineers consider the following comments in consideration of the final subdivision application: provision of adequate snow clearing, adequate drainage, off-site improvements to the existing portion of Fernwood, and whether on-street parking should be limited or restricted. So that's the motion moved by Councillor Noble. Before I look for a seconder, staff might have a little input for us. Ms. Pedrini, did you have something?
Thank you, Mayor Richmond. I just wanted to add a couple of points of clarification. For this particular application, we did receive one letter of support, and that's from the property to the north of this property, the property that would be given access through if this variance and subdivision was approved. I also just wanted to note for clarification then that through a development variance permit process, there isn't the obligation to prove hardship in the same way as when someone approaches the Board of Variance looking for a variance to a zoning or subdivision development control bylaw. So just wanted to make that note.
Thank you. So there's a motion being tabled. Would somebody like to second?
Second the motion.
I'll call for further discussion. Any opposed? Councillor
Would you like that? Would you like that noted, Councillor Antonelli?
Yes.
One opposed, motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Chalmers and Ms. Pedrini. Just give a chance to clear the screens. Okay, so we're moving on to here 9B, which is Office of the CAO. We'll get a verbal report from our acting CAO, Ms. Fraser.
I have nothing to report on CAO Gilmore's behalf.
Thank you. Okay, then we'll go right into Corporate and Legislative Services, and we'll look to our Corporate and Legislative Officer, Ms. Fraser.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, for having me this morning. I am presenting as part of the quarterly report presentations, the outstanding resolutions listing that is currently in place right now. These are resolutions that have been passed over time that have either not been completely acted on or mostly because work is still ongoing, so they haven't been completed. We have 3 resolutions that go back to 2018 on several items which are all actually incorporated into the strategic plan the council has supported in the last year, and that work is ongoing. And then we have some other work that is ongoing related to Crown land tenures. And again, that information is, we've got applications in-house and we're waiting on the provincial level for them to complete their process. And then the last one is the development cost charge bylaw, which is in the 2021 work plan. You might recall that it was on the 2020 work plan and is, but got deferred. So that is where we are. We have no new outstanding resolutions from the last report, which was done, which I reported out on the last quarter of 2020. So these ones are just still on hold as we move through the process to complete those projects.
Thank you. Any questions on the outstanding resolutions? Seeing none, could I please get a motion to receive?
Motion to receive.
Seconded by Councillor Noble. Any opposed? Motion carries. Then we're on to, oh no, that's been moved. So that'll take us to 9D, correct? Recreation Services first quarter report. We'll wait for Ms. Burns to join us. Oh, sorry, I was looking at my other screen. Good morning, Ms. Burns. Welcome. Thanks for joining us. Good morning.
Thank you for having me.
You for your quarterly report.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Mayor and Council. It's a pleasure once again to be in front of you. As Council may recall, we've had some ongoing challenges with adjusting to continual amendments to public health orders and restrictions throughout first quarter. However, I really want to take an opportunity to pat all of my staff on the back. They've continued to impress me with their ability to be resilient and adjust with anything that has been thrown at them. So I feel like our recreation department has done a wonderful job adapting to the continued effects of COVID-19. I think you'll see that obviously from a stats perspective, we are down from a participation perspective. However, realistically, we actually feel really good about where we are at. Any programs that we are capable of offering continue to be received beyond well, in that they're full with wait lists, which is awesome. We're continuing to grow. We're hopefully continuing to offer more programming for the community as we start to venture outside again. We're very pleased with how first quarter went, considering the circumstances. I would open it up to any questions that you may have. I think report page 58 through 64 of 131 kind of speaks for itself. But I'm always open to hearing any concerns or feedback that you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Burns. Can you tell us how the vaccination clinic's going with your staff and the operations?
Yeah, so that has been something that started in March. We have I guess it's our third vaccination clinic will be this Thursday. You know, it's ongoing and it's a bit of a surprise. But staff is mobilizing quickly to accommodate Vancouver Coastal Health's needs. And so this is, I do believe they anticipate this being the largest one the community has seen so far. The first clinic, I believe, did over 80 and we saw about 85 participants. The next clinic saw 70 plus, and they had about 150 individuals participate. This one, I believe, is 60 plus. They were expecting approximately 900 residents to participate. However, I think with how Whistler did a bulk vaccination clinic there 2 weeks ago, that may mean we'll see less, but we're still waiting to hear from Vancouver Coastal Health. But we're ready for them on Thursday morning.
But operationally for you guys, it's okay. It's not impacting your programming needs too much. You guys are managing.
No, thank you thank you to Mayor and Council for going the distance with waiving their fees for service in the facility, because as a result of that, we've been able to negotiate moving them around if we need to. So at this stage in the game, they haven't impacted our programming in any way, shape, or form, because we've been capable of moving anything that might need to be.
Perfect.
So, yeah.
Awesome. Any questions from council? Did you put your hand up, Councillor Zant?
Just thank you, Mayor Richmond. I wanted to second your pat on the back to your staff. With what they're having to deal with in the last year and a half is unbelievable. But big thank you to you and your staff. The community center continues to be a hub for a positive vibe. So thank you for that. And my question just goes to, when you're moving your activities outside, I assume you'll be on the Great Lawn, and will that be moving forward in your program to book that time on the Great Lawn or sections of the Great Lawn?
Thank you for that question through Mayor Richmond. At this stage in the game, we're utilizing the brick space between the facility and the Great Lawn for fitness programs, as well as we are monitoring who is utilizing the public space if they are coming in a group format. At this point in time, it's such a very popular community space. For children's programs and things like that, once we start to move them outside, our goal is to move them around the community a little more and take advantage of some of the other outdoor spaces that are available to public to potentially program in.
Thank you.
Any questions? Is PYSA all set to use our field this summer? Are they organized and ready and good?
They're ramping up as quickly as we can allow them with the refurbishing of the fields that is occurring at this prime growth stage.
And what's the timeline on that? Christine, any sense?
Well, another probably 6 weeks. However, with the current PHO status, they're only allowed to do skills and drills. So what is available is totally accommodating their need at this time.
Okay, well, if there's no other questions, can I please get a motion to receive the report?
Motion to receive.
Second by Councilor Noble. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much, Ms. Burns. Have a great day. Next, we're going to go to Development Services. We will welcome Ms. Pedrini back. Welcome back, Ms. Pedrini. I'll turn it over to you for your quarterly report.
Good morning, Council, Mayor and Council, once again. So I'm here this morning to present the first quarter report for 2021 for the period of January to March. So just hopping along to the building division. So we had a very busy quarter. We had a total number of 38 building permits issued. Most of those were in the other category, which would include decks and renovations. In terms of the development cost charges collected, we collected an amount of $34,876 as shown in the table on page 2 of my report and page 66 of the agenda. And in terms of current planning applications, those applications that are new or updates that are new to the first quarter are shown in bold font. So we've got 3 development permits underway. The Harmony Reach Wylands Combined Commercial Residential Development is still on hold pending development variance permit. And we have the Aspect, which would be a multifamily building. At this point, they are looking to do dedicated rental at 1422 to 1430 Portage Road. That remains in process. And we received a new development permit application. This would be for a mixed-use building in our downtown core. And that was received in February and is in process. With respect to development variance permits, we received 2 variance permits for properties along Cerulean Drive. And I believe council's already seen those applications, so you're well aware that they're in process. The third was the Fernwood variance DVP, which was just presented to you. So that revised application, oh goodness. Oh goodness, sorry, my screen just went blank for a second. That revised application was received within the third quarter. In terms of OCP and or rezoning applications, the French school or the CSF application from school district number 93 is in process. Just a little heads up, we hope to have that report presented to council and at our May meeting. There was a retaining wall zoning bylaw amendment that council considered and did not support, so that did not move forward. And we have also received the Benchlands Neighborhood Concept Plan, OCP, and zoning bylaw amendment. So that is quite a large submission that was received in March and is currently under review. That one probably won't be seen by council for a while. There's a lot of material to get through and a lot of initial steps. We're just mapping out the process of how we're going to handle that review at this point in time. Subdivision applications, we've got 7 in-house at this point. Tayada Phase 4, the Fernwood application, which relates to the development variance permit that was just supported. So that is a 4-lot subdivision, including the existing home site there. There's an application for a lot split, and that would be to split the Public Works building off of the lot shared by the SLRD and VOP at 1350 Astor Street. That one is in process. The application to subdivide off the new residential lot that was created on Poplar from the high school property is in process. And Sunstone Phase 2 remains in process. And the application to split the Village of Pemberton's lot at the industrial park at 1929 Stonecutter Place to allow for the SLRD to relocate its waste transfer station is also in process. Oh, sorry. And then we've got a new application that was received in our first quarter, and that is for Sunstone Phase 1C. Oh, and there's a typo there. It should be 14 fee simple lots plus a remainder, which has been received in January and is in process.
I like Feel Simple.
Not feel simple, no. None of it feels simple. And then there is some site alteration permits that were received and have all been issued in the first quarter. All right, so moving on to our long range planning projects. In terms of our affordable housing action plan, the work program or implementation program, within our first quarter, we held a virtual information session, and we also launched a community survey. That survey has ended now. We have the results in-house. Those will be analyzed and presented to council in the future as part of the official community plan review. So basically, some of those results will be analyzed and formulated. They'll help inform policy statements that will be presented as part of a revised official community plan. We've also held meetings with the Lions and with BC Housing. At this point in time, we are waiting on BC Housing to send through a list of vetted consultants that could help the Lions access some pre-development funding. And basically, once we get that list, the Lions can hire a consultant that would help them put together an application to BC Housing to gain funding that would help them put together the bigger application that would go forward to BC Housing when they advise of their next funding round. So in order to access the community housing funding that BC Housing offers, you need to have like a professional working together to put together a very solid proposal. And so that is the way we're headed, and the village is partnering with the Lions on this process. In terms of our climate action plan, we also held we wrapped up our key stakeholder engagement in the first quarter. We held a virtual information session, and we also launched another community survey. The community survey was launched in April. So it's underway right now. The deadline is goodness, it could actually, we could have hit it by now. I just don't recall off the top of my head the deadline for that survey. And the results of the community survey will be used by the Community Energy Association to put together the finalized draft, which will be presented to council in the form of our community climate action plan. And we hope to have that plan coming forward very soon for council's consideration of approval. I probably mentioned this a few times. We are always looking to do updates as needed to our zoning bylaw, and there's a few mapping amendments that we need to make to our zoning map. So that is in process. That's a in-house village initiated rezoning. And we are also working towards reviewing and updating our development cost charge bylaw. As well, now that the budget is approved, we can proceed with an RFP for help with our official community plan review. And we also have a building bylaw which has been updated and is being reviewed by legal at this point. So that will be coming forward soon for council's consideration as well. So that is my first quarter update at this point. So I recommend that the report be received, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? That's great.
Yeah, thanks very much, and thanks for the report, Ms. Pedrini. On page 66, where you talk about DCCs collected, I'll probably asked this question a number of times over the years. Why is the amount we collect for drainage so small? The amount of $286, that wouldn't give us 2 hours of equipment time to do any work. So can you just give me an update on that? And is it necessary, or do we need to revisit that and increase that amount?
Well, as I mentioned, the DCC bylaw is on our work plan. So we will be looking at updating that bylaw. The amount collected completely depends on the rates that are set in our current DCC bylaw. So for each project, there's a certain, I'm not sure how to explain the math. I wonder, Sheena, if you would be able to assist with this. So it's a prorated, or not prorated, sorry. It's
a sliding scale?
Yeah, it's kind of, I want to say per capita, but that's not the right term. But yeah, so each application, there's a certain amount attributed to each of these different funds. And so the amount collected for drainage is typically the lowest. I hope that helps.
I guess we'll look at it when you bring back the review.
Any other questions? The motion received then.
Thank you.
Councillor Noble, seconded by Councillor Zant. Any discussion? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Pedrini. Now we're on to the discharge of covenant CA 2723154, and we're going to be joined by Ms. Segovia as well. We'll give her a moment.
I apologize, I froze up there. Am I still out there?
Good morning, Ms. Segovia.
Good morning.
Prepared to hear you speak to us about the potential discharge of covenant CA 2723154. Give it to you.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. Thank you for having me. Today I'm providing an overview of the report I submitted for the discharge of covenant CA 2723154, modified by covenant CA 4950099 from Lot 5, District Lot 211, Plan EPP 21848, otherwise known as 7374 Pemberton Farm Road East. And this will be in preparation for the potential sale of the property. Just to provide a little bit of background, the original covenant CA 2723154 is attached as Appendix A and can be seen on pages 72 to 77 of your agenda package. The modification CA 4950099 is attached as Appendix B and can be seen starting on page 78 of the agenda package. The original covenant CA 2723154 was registered as a Section 219 restrictive covenant on July the 9th of 2012 and it was a part of the plan to subdivide lands otherwise known as the Ridge. The legal description of the land registered was Lot 1, District Lot 211, Lillooet District Plan KAP 87819. At the time of the registration, it was registered to ensure the lands were developed in accordance with the development plan identified in the covenant as Schedule A. And this was for the developer to agree to the restrictions as outlined in the covenant. In January of 2016, it was modified at the time of rezoning of the Ridge. As seen in Appendix B, the legal description of the lands on the covenant modifications are lots 2 and 3, District Lot 211, Plan EPP 21848. This pertained to phase 1, 2, and 3 of the Ridge subdivisions. The modifications included the removal of subsections 1B and 1D. The former was the removal of a community amenity contribution, and 1D was the removal of a site servicing agreement. The covenant is currently listed on the title for the subject lands with a legal description as Lot 5, District Lot 211, Plan EPP 21848. The land title is attached as Appendix C, beginning on page 90 of your agenda package. As both the covenant and its modification do not include Lot 5 in their schedules or their appendix maps, it is believed that the covenant was registered to Lot 5 in error, as the property is adjacent to both lots 1, 2, and 3. This is probably due to the fact that at one time, Lot 5 was a part of a parent parcel. If you want to take a more visual look at the lots as a whole, I recommend turning to page 87 of the agenda package. There is a map there that you can clearly see. Lot 5 is not included in the emboldened lines of the diagram that pertains to the Ridge subdivision. The covenant establishes certain restrictions and developer obligations on lots 1, 2, and 3. And the request for the discharge is based on any future land transactions being erroneously burdened and restricted by the covenant currently registered on the title for Lot 5. Should any sale or transaction be completed and a different future owner pursue development of the lands in a form that is different than what is identified in Rural Residential 1 zoning, an OCP amendment and a bylaw amendment application would be required. At that stage, the village will have the ability to fine-tune any additional amenities, developer obligations, or covenants to be registered through a new land development agreement. So the owner of the current land has requested that the covenant be just discharged from his title, as he believes it was registered in error. And I would like to say that staff are therefore prepared to support the discharge of covenant CA 2723154, modified by covenant CA 4950099. Please let me know if you have questions, and thank you for having me.
Good presentation, nice job. One really quick question. I think it's at the heart of it. So in the discussion of comments, and you just said it, that should the sale transaction, a different owner or a different future owner pursue development of the lands in a form different than identified in Rural Residential 1. So if somebody were to if this were to get discharged and somebody were to purchase the property, what could they do under RR1?
That would be a question that Lisa can answer for me, because I'm not a planner.
Sure. So the Rural Residential 1 basically allows one single family dwelling,
right,
and one accessory suite, and basically uses similar to the agricultural zoning, but it just doesn't sit within the ALR.
But I just wanted to be clear, it's a single family use. right? So
Yes,
if
yes.
somebody, a future owner wants to develop this for multi-family use in any form, a duplex, triplex, or beyond, they have to come with a rezoning and therefore, or come forward for a rezoning, and that's the point at which we would be able to ensure that there's appropriate park dedication, et cetera, correct?
Yeah, if there was an application to densify this, the use of this lot, yes, they would be obliged to apply for both an OCP and a zoning bylaw amendment. And then that would trigger the discretionary decision of council, and it would trigger community amenity contribution expectations, DCCs, et cetera, et cetera.
Questions from council? Councilor Antonelli.
The amenities that are discussed in the covenants, the berm and the trail, are those complete?
I would say the bulk of the amenities in the covenant are complete. I believe there is one outstanding amenity, and that will be negotiated with the application that has come forward for the subdivision of Sunstone Phase 1C, which will be an extension of Cerulean Drive, and it actually is within the property owned by the Ridge. So we'll be able to capture any outstanding CACs with that final phase of the Ridge development.
Right, so we're happy with the trail and the berm then.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure what you're referring to.
Oh, just in one of the covenants, it talks about a berm to protect from railway noise, and it talks about a section of trail to be constructed.
Oh.
And you know, these covenants are placed on title to ensure that the owners do this. And so I'm wondering, have they done it before we discharge covenant?
With respect to the berming for the CN rail, that actually was taken off the plate by, I guess, I know that it was removed in some form. I don't know if it was through negotiations with CN itself, but that won't be forthcoming. And then the section of trail, there has been a trail built between Sunstone and the Ridge along the boundary line. So I believe that covers off that as well, but I'm not really at this point prepared to speak to the specifics of the covenant attached to the Ridge development.
Other questions from council? Okay, open for comments then. No comments, and somebody like to make a motion? Councillor Noble.
I'll move the recommendation.
Is there a seconder? Further discussion, seconded by Councillor Zant. Further discussion? Call the question. Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Virginie. Thank you, Ms. Segovia.
Thank you.
Okay. So we're over 2 hours now. We probably have close to an hour left in this agenda, I would assume. How's everybody doing? We got a couple other meetings ahead. I don't want to over Zoom us in the first go here. Do you guys need a 15-minute recess? How's everybody feeling?
Keep going.
I wouldn't mind 5 minutes.
5 is fine for me.
Okay, it's 11:05. Let's come back in about 5 minutes here. So I'll
Thank
quickly.
you.
Can someone speak? Good, here we go.
Councilor Antonelli, one more minute. Okay, I'm going to call the meeting back to order, and we're going to move on. We're going to invite Mr. Chima.
Good morning, Mayor and Council.
Good morning, Mr. Chima. Thank you
Morning.
for joining us. We're turn it over to you for your quarterly report.
Thanks for having me. Sorry, I've switched on to my phone because the internet here at the office hasn't been too great, but hopefully you can hear me and see me okay. If not, let me know. So I'm here to present our first quarter report for 2021. Our first quarter started with some pretty big snowfalls. I know it's funny to talk about snow now, but yeah, obviously early January we had some snowfalls, but overall we saw a relatively light snow year, which was good because we took on a couple pretty big items with the airport clearing regularly, as well as the Sunstone. But as I say, with the lower snowfall, it didn't greatly impact us this year, but there's some concern going forward, the impact that will have. Also in the first quarter, we had quite a bit of recruiting going on. We actually hired engineering and GIS technician, Usman Tarar, and also a new assistant manager of operations in Alistair Chappell. So technically, Alistair started in the second quarter, I think the first week of the second quarter, but I mention it because obviously he's working now. As for regular maintenance and small projects, we have the regular operation of the wastewater treatment plant, water operations, well house, pumping stations, etc. We also started the staff bathroom project in the public workshop, which is currently underway and hoping to finish that shortly. The well house standby generator project has commenced with the RFP out. We've purchased the generator and it's being manufactured currently, and we're just about to get the RFP out for the installation and construction work. Well number 3, redevelopment and subsequent pump and motor issues that we had and troubleshooting. I did mention this at the last quarterly report. When we redeveloped the well, we had some issues with the pump and motor and we had to make some repairs, but all of that has been resolved. We performed our village-wide water main flushing, wastewater treatment plant. We had some maintenance items, including the replacement of the compressor for the belt press, and we performed our outfall dive inspections, which council will remember the outfall issues that we had last year. We decided to do annual inspections where the divers actually go and inspect the performance of the outfall. So we completed those this year, and there's a few other operational changes we're hoping to do as well. Ongoing pothole and road repairs, road and sidewalk sweeping in the spring. We also had a few, I've noted on here, a few incidents. Sewer main break at the Plateau and Highway 99. There was a water main repair that had to happen in the industrial park. Also, we investigated an old water main leak along Portage Road. I just mentioned these because they're pretty impactful on our crew and operations, but also indicative perhaps of some of the age of our infrastructure. So we also were working on the SLRD transfer station that was mentioned in the development services report. As part of that subdivision, we had to service both proposed lots. So we completed that in the second quarter, but the initial servicing planning was done in the first quarter. And as well as the regular design review for the development, engineering design review for, again, what was mentioned in development services report, all the development applications that we've been seeing coming in. As for parks, ongoing garbage collection and toilets sanitation, Christmas lights removal. We also completed a section of the boardwalk at 1 Mile Lake, which connected to the new trail that was built as part of the fish habitat restoration project, just at the end of the first quarter there. And we're hoping to make a couple other small improvements there, as well as looking at some trail improvements around the lake as we get into summer here. The regular spring parks preparation, debris removal from parks, etc. and also quite a bit of work on the recreation site preparations, including soccer field number 2, which construction has been underway currently, and also the Bike Skills Park, which has had extensive site preparations as well. Other than that, I'll open it up to questions from council. If you have any questions on our regular operations.
Thank you, Mr. Chima. Questions? Councilor Carr, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks very much for the report. Appreciate it. And the staff is doing a great job cleaning up the community and getting all the gardens prepared. It looks really nice. 2 questions I have. First question is, I see the outhouses are in place at the north end of the barn. Wondering when the fencing is going to be going up around there?
Yes, I thought you might ask about that. We just put those toilets in ahead of schedule. My intention was to put them in for concurrent with the farmers market as we had in past years, but it just came up in an operations meeting that there was a need to put them in sooner. So we will put it on the work plan to screen them. But unfortunately, when they were removed at the start of COVID, they had to be cut out because the asphalt was around them. So we're just going to have to look at how we'll do it this time. Because yeah, the asphalt had to be patched up. I guess people were urinating behind the screening once the toilets were removed. So, but we will look at that. It will be added to the work plan.
Thanks very much. And the second question is, I see on your report that you put in here that you're doing regular snow clearing at the airport runway and taxiways. We've never done regular maintenance of that before. So I guess the question I'm going to ask is the cost of doing that versus the usage, a good use of town money.
I might allow our corporate services manager to help weigh in on this, but my directive was that according to the lease agreements with the leaseholders at the airport, we do have an obligation to perform snow clearing operations. And if we do have to perform the operations, it has to be regular because it's not feasible to be called out just to do snow clearing on demand, because if it's not done constantly, then it gets icy and piled too high and it becomes not feasible to do. So I'm not sure if Ms. Fraser wants to weigh in on some of that, but I understood that there was some discussion around that with council as well, but I'm not sure.
So council may recall that we did get a quote on what it would cost to clear the airport on a regular basis, and it was up around $90,000 to $100,000 if we were to contract it out. What we decided to do was see how we could work it and if it's something that could be worked into the schedule based on the policy, which is that the village streets and sidewalks are cleared and to the satisfaction that it's safe and the area is operational. And I mean, we were fortunate this year because we didn't have a very heavy snow and we didn't have a lot of cyclical snowfalls that we have seen in previous years where we are, day after day after day, new snow. So the public works crew was able to get out to the airport after they completed their work in the town core. And what we would do is we would file a notum to close the runway while we were waiting for that work to get done. And generally, our crew was able to get out there within 2 or 3 days of the snowfall. So we are monitoring it. We're going to check and see what the costs to us were at the end of, we'll have to look at the end of December of this year, and then we'll see what we're going to be able to continue to accommodate. And it is all subject to the availability of the public works crew. If they are not available, then it is lower down on the priority list as per the policy that we have in place.
So I might follow up, Mayor Richmond, when we get that report, will we have also a number of people that are using it to make it worthwhile for us to do the work required?
We're not, we can try and do that. We don't monitor the number of flights that come in and out on a regular basis. We don't have the capability to do that. We are aware that there's one tenant out there who did fly in and out several times, but I don't know how many times that would be. So that is the unknown. But we'll look at and try to get as much information as we can for council to consider.
Thank you.
Questions for Mr. Chino? Go ahead, Councillor Antonelli.
Can you give us some more information on what the divers found?
Yes, absolutely. I didn't want to dive too much into it unless you ask, but I would love to. So you might remember that we made some modifications to the outfall diffuser ports. We essentially attached large steel enforced tubing to the ends of them. We found that they were buried in sediment. However, they were easily exposed and flowing well. So we've essentially confirmed that the sediment is continuing to be a problem, although the modifications that we made seem to be holding up in those conditions. We're still looking at some other operational changes that we'd like to make at the plant, involving like some flushing, regular flushing, just to make sure that they don't get blocked up. But it does appear as though what we did is working.
Do you see the need for further sediment diversion in the future, or you're confident that what we did continue to work?
Well, I'm not confident. I'm not confident that it will work forever. I think it's a very complex issue. I've included in our budget this year to also do some more river surveying with the hydrologists that are very familiar with the area, doing the flood mapping with the Diking District at NHC. They were the ones that assisted us during that emergency repair that we had to do, and their suggestion was to excavate a channel that would hopefully not fill in. It immediately did, but the modifications we'd made to the outfall allow us to continue to operate without the impact. But I guess in short, I am concerned that we will need to do more work there. I think right now we're monitoring it more frequently, and we won't be caught off guard. We won't just all of a sudden see that there's a meter of sediment over top of our outfall like what happened last time. You may remember that this was determined. We only require a dive inspection every 5 years. And so in the 5 years between dive inspections, in fact, the one previously, they had noted that there was sediment. It wasn't enough to be alarming at the time. But yeah, within those 5 years, the outfall diffuser port was completely buried. So I think now we're continuing the annual inspection. We won't get caught off guard, but I'm not confident that we can just dust our hands clean of this. I think it's going to be an ongoing issue. And I think that, we'll look at our options. But I think that sooner we will need to review the plant's capacity and the location for other reasons. And at that time, we may consider other solutions for this problem, because as we know, the sediment will continue to come for the next 20-25 years. So sorry, that's probably not the answer you want to hear, but yeah, I'm not 100% confident that the modifications we made would completely absolve us of any issues there.
Okay.
But the good thing is we haven't had a problem since we've done that. So operationally, there's been no impacts.
Okay. Any other questions? A couple of quick questions. One comment following up on Councillor Craddock's mention of the bathrooms by the barn I feel like there could be some better signage potentially for visitors to know where bathrooms are located. I know there are some, but yeah, I just watching people walk around and what happens, and I know a lot of local businesses get asked to use their washroom. So perhaps consider the signage or making the availability of those bathrooms really obvious would be my one comment. Question around the flow of water around 1 Mile Lake. How is that all looking? What's the early season beaver activity? Are you happy with the work we did last year?
Yes. So we have not seen any beaver activity in the new channel, which is great news for everyone except for Rizard, our volunteer stream keeper, who now complains that I put him out of work. Although he's got plenty to do in the other channels. But yeah, we've been very pleased with the result in terms of beaver activity. The one concern that we've seen is the sedimentation. Again, this is unrelated to a landslide, but just the seasonal flows. But I did note, you may remember in our conclusion report of that project, that we found the culvert that connects Pemberton Creek to this inlet channel is extremely rotted, and the gate valve on it is ineffective. So we do have it in the scope of work this year to replace that culvert and the gate valve, with the idea being that at extremely high flow times, when you get the high sediment, we could go and close off that valve, prevent some of that sedimentation that's happening in the channel. But initially, in our first year of observation, the only observation we made was that the sediment is starting to accumulate in certain spots in the channel. But we're still working with the Department of Fisheries to get that project on for this year, and we'll continue to monitor it. And I think I've also been working with the Diking District, who's gratefully offered to keep that as part of their routine. If we do replace that gate valve, that they could go, they're doing that type of work during those high flow times. And so he said he could just add that to their list. And I think, I think we've got a pretty good program there. We might make some minor modifications to the channel just based on what we've seen, like directional changes and the sedimentation that's caused by that. But otherwise, we're very pleased with the result. And I think we'll see colder temperatures in the lake this year, as well as less weed growth and all the other problems that we saw.
That's great news, Tom. Last quick question. How's the soccer field project going? Everything...
Yeah, we actually had our pre-construction meeting on site yesterday. So we were the work that was being done is bringing the grade up, the final subgrade up, so that it's pretty much ready for the soccer field contractors to start their work. They're planning on mobilizing next week and starting in the next 2 or 3 weeks. Just depends on the lights order that's coming in, but otherwise, yeah, we're sort of trucking straight ahead on that project, and very exciting. There's been a couple modifications to the design just based on layout and some site issues, but otherwise it's been going pretty well.
Awesome. Great. Thank you so much for all of that. If there's no other questions, I'll look for a motion to receive, please. Mr. Caddick, seconded by Councillor Grant. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Chima.
Thank you very much.
We'll wait for Fire Chief Grossman to join us. It's great news about 1 Mile. I'm glad that's working well. That's going to be a huge improvement over last summer.
And that new access they put in is just excellent. Mayor Richmond used a lot. I'm down there often, and the little sitting areas in that new deck was really well done.
Good morning, Mr. Grossman. Welcome. I'll turn it over to you for your quarterly report, Chair.
Thank you. Good morning, Mayor and Council. Thank you for the opportunity to give the first quarter report. So in the first quarter, we responded to 66 incidences. In review and comparison to previous years, the call volumes are down. Part of that is the cooler weather in March. The COVID measures have kept incidents down as not many people were traveling. It is anticipated, though, that there will be an increase in traffic volumes as the weather starts to get warmer, which in turn will result in an increase in incidents. As well, BC Wildfire Services has issued a press release advising communities of the drying trend. And with the water or snowfall that we didn't have and the rain that we didn't have, there's going to be a higher risk. They're anticipating 2016, 17, 18 wildfire season this year, just due to the drying trend. And even though there's water in some areas, it's disappearing quickly. And I've been in communication with the Coastal Fire Base here on a weekly basis, just what's going on, and that just letting you know that we're working continued cooperation and efforts at the fire prevention and reporting levels. So on page 95 of the report is the comparisons. As you can see, the 5-year comparison is slightly down compared to previous years. Then the next report on page 96 shows the number of firefighters attending incidences, and we're around the right level. The alarms are down quite a bit compared to what we need for manpower, and same with structure fires. Vehicle fires are up slightly, but most of that was the vehicle fires that we did have. We actually had 2 and 3 incidences going on at the same time, so one would get done. We'd send the extra crews over to help assist with the vehicle fires, so that's why that one was slightly up. The next report on page 97 just shows which days, how many calls we had. And then the types of responses we had. Our medical aid was up in the first quarter due to reports of COVID and breathing difficulties, chest issues and all that. We're working closely with BC Ambulance. We're responding, but being very careful in attending certain calls, or we're there in case we're needed, but we stay social distance away and stay in our vehicle until asked to come out, just in case. And this is partially due to the fact that Whistler in the first quarter had 6 members, which was 2 shifts down with COVID, which included their families as well. So we're really cautious. Training was at almost a standstill for the later part of March. As you can see too, in the next, where most of our calls were, and it was Lillooet Nation, was a lot of the medical calls due to the outbreak that they had with COVID in the first quarter. And then the Village of Pemberton, we had a lot of other incidences. Our membership at the end of the first quarter, we had 37 members, 2 full-time members and 35 paid on calls. Members in the first quarter continued training on a weekly basis under a modified program due to the COVID protocols. We were doing 5 to 7 training sessions a week, which put a lot of strain on us. There's 4 to 5 members. As you can see, the training hours we put in was 58. There was total a number of 58 training sessions, 130 hours. Special training, which was on top of regular training, first responder and all that. We had 15 of those, 105 hours. We had 6 different meetings going on with different organizations, BC Wildfire Service, Mount Currie, a few things like that. There's 4 hours of that. Setup and takedown of the events, we had 6 hours of that. And then 66 incidences is 71 hours. During the first quarter, the following, we did 6 new business application reviews and inspections and reviewed 2 fire safety plans. That is my report. If you have any questions, I'm open for discussion.
Thank you, sir. Chief, all your members have been
Looks
back.
like everybody's frozen.
Well, you're frozen, we're not. But we can still hear you. Have all your members been vaccinated? Oh, now he's totally frozen. All right. I'd say go ahead, Councillor Caddick, but I don't think Chief Grossman's with us.
Actually, it was probably a question through administration. What are we doing about getting this internet service repaired? This has been ongoing for a number of weeks now.
We have Shaw coming in with our IT folks tomorrow to take a look. They've been doing some summary of the, I don't speak IT speak, but they've been monitoring and they'll have the statistics, and that will be happening tomorrow to review it and see what's happening.
Thanks very much.
Chief, it looks like you're back with us.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just making sure that we got all our firefighters through the community clinic in Whistler.
What was that?
That we got our firefighters all through the community vaccination clinic in Whistler.
They're not all through yet. We're still waiting for people to get through. So still an ongoing battle.
Are you still having access issues? Because I've had a lot of conversations about this to make sure that we have the access.
We're just waiting for phone calls to see who and what's available. We've got the list going on as to who has it. So we're getting everybody through as much as we can.
Great, thanks.
Making sure that they're up to date. So,
questions from council? No questions. Thorough report. Well, thank you very much, Chief Grossman. Have a great
thank you.
Oh, motion to receive, please. Councillor Caddick, seconded by Councillor Noble. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thanks again. Okay, we're going to wait for Ms. Martin to join us next.
I just want to flag Mayor Richmond that we are coming close to 3 hours, at which time we'll have to do a resolution. That'll probably be after Ms. Martin's presentation.
Okay, let's keep plugging along then. So good morning, Ms. Martin. We're looking at the bylaws for first, second, third, and adoption. I'll turn it over to you.
Yes. Okay. Good. Are we in the afternoon? We're almost at the afternoon. So good morning to Mayor and Council. I'm bringing forward a report to introduce the following Village of Pemberton bylaws for first, second, third readings and adoption. We're looking at the annual tax rates, sewer frontage, water frontage, sewer rates, water rates, and a new alternate municipal tax collection scheme. Our ongoing COVID-19 pandemic continues to create a financial strain for the community. In 2020, the province of BC announced BC's COVID-19 action plan to support businesses. School taxes for some classes were reduced, and the penalty date for business and farm classes was postponed to October 1st, 2020. The Village of Pemberton further supported the community by freezing taxes and focusing on core service deliverables. For 2021, Council may, by bylaw, establish an alternate municipal tax collection scheme under Section 235 of the Community Charter. A bylaw may establish penalties and interest to be applied in relation to payments made after the tax due date established by this bylaw. If the municipality has not established an alternative scheme, the general tax collection scheme applies. If the municipality has established an alternative scheme, it is the election of the owner to either choose the alternative scheme or the general scheme. The general tax collection scheme has that property taxes are due on July 2nd of the year, and the Lieutenant Governor and Council may make regulations establishing penalties and interest that must be applied by municipalities. An alternative municipal tax collection scheme or under an alternative municipal tax collection scheme, a council may by bylaw establish penalties and interest to be applied in relation to payments made after the tax due date established by the bylaw. The alternative municipal tax collection scheme sets a July 2nd due date, same as the general scheme, but applies a 5% penalty on any unpaid taxes at after July 2nd. Any remaining unpaid taxes on October 1st, 2021 will have the final 5% penalty applied. We do have to apply 10% in the year, but under the alternative scheme, we have split that penalty into 2 payment dates. If property owners wish to pay 10% penalty at July 2nd, the community charter requires that owners be given a period of notice to the municipality. So we have set that date for June 15th. Staff does not anticipate any requests for the general scheme that allows for a 10% penalty at July 3rd. Staff will encourage property owners who are financially able to meet the July 2nd due date to still do so to help keep village programs and services in place. Postponing 50% of the property tax penalty to October 1st, 2021 through the alternative municipal tax collection scheme bylaw will provide all property owners an additional 90 calendar days of payment relief during the COVID-19 pandemic. Staff anticipates foregoing approximately $10,000 in penalty revenues with the extended penalty date. Revenue losses under the alternative municipal tax collection scheme are eligible under the COVID recovery grant. Alternative options for council's consideration. Council may choose to keep the general tax collection scheme, which is a 10% penalty date after the tax due date. Are there any questions?
Questions? Okay, great. It's because you're so clear. We under the COVID pandemic emergency measures, we're allowed to do 3 readings and adoption on the same go, and we have 6 different bylaws here. So what I'll do is I'll look for a recommendation to do first, second, third, and adoption of each bylaw. So starting with the Village of Pemberton 2021 annual tax rates bylaw number 896. Can I ask for a motion for first, second, third reading and adoption?
I'll make that motion.
Second by Councillor Noble. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next for Village of Pemberton bylaw number 136, 1979, sewer frontage amendment bylaw 897. Can I get a motion first, second, third, and adoption?
Make the motion.
Second by Councillor Noble. Any opposed? Motion carries. The next is Village of Pemberton bylaw 137, 1979, water frontage tax amendment bylaw 896. Moved by Councillor Noble, seconded by Councillor Antonelli. Any opposed? Motion carries. I'll lose my spot here. Village of Pemberton sanitary sewer system regulation connection and rates amendment bylaw 899. First, second, third, and adoption. Moved by
Councillor Zant.
second by Councillor Noble. Any opposed? Motion carries. Couple more. Village of Pemberton water regulation connection and rates bylaw number 232, 1989. Amendment bylaw 900. Moved by
Councillor Zant.
Councillor Craddock. Any opposed? Motion carries. Village of Pemberton alternative municipal tax collection scheme 2021 bylaw 901. Moved by Councillor Noble, second by Councillor Antonelli. Any opposed? Motion carries. Did I miss any, Ms. Fraser? And Ms. Martin?
I think you got them all.
Excellent.
Yes, you got them all. Well done. Thank you, everybody, for your patience.
Thank you, Ms. Martin. Okay, we're on to the 10B. It's business license bylaw number 855, amendment bylaw 894. Ms. Fraser, are you going to speak to
This is for adoption.
Okay. So we'd like to move adoption.
Councillor Zant.
Seconded by Councillor Noble. Any discussion? Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay. Oh, can I get a motion? Well, we're close, but I'll get a motion to extend our regular meeting, please. Councillor Craddock, seconded by Councillor Noble. Any opposed? Motion carries. Can't move extending the meeting and then leave. Oh, he's back. I extended, but I'm out of here. Okay, Mayor's report. Actually, relatively short this week. I'll start with the SLRD, which was one of our less massive agendas and a lot that wasn't quite around Pemberton. So I'll just stay tight. There was a presentation from BC Hydro, which is always interesting, just to, it's their large capital project update in the Bridge River area. And it's always interesting to hear because there is a massive amount of work being done and being projected for the next few years up in that area. We approved a temporary use permit for Twin River gravel site to house the mobile concrete plant. I've mentioned this before. This came back. It was publicized and sent out for referral, and there were no comments on it. So that there was a couple comments actually, sorry, from the neighbor on the other side of the highway. And so that was reviewed again and passed. There was a DVP passed for Pemberton Meadows Road for the extension of a suite on a garage. A couple other DVPs in the Britannia area. Interesting note, there's been a reassessment of the COVID restart funds, and if you recall, regional districts received sort of less than municipalities for a number of reasons, but they have topped it up a little bit for regional districts. So the SLRD is now getting an additional $120,000 to use in their COVID restart funds. The Committee of the Whole, we had a presentation from Plug-in BC. It's a program through the Fraser Basin Council, and it's about electrification of vehicles and climate change. And it's interesting. It's very much incentive based. There's other supports that they provide through this program. And again, if you want to look it up, it's the Fraser Basin Council that have this program going. And it's called Plug-in BC, and it's supports in general, but a lot of it is about incentives for residents, for local governments, for workplaces, for bus systems, for business fleets. So how you can access incentives, how to start electrifying your business fleets or just personal, and again, support for local government. So hopefully that could be considered in our community action plan. But yeah, it's a good thing to be aware of. I wasn't aware that there was those kinds of incentives and supports out there. What else? Attended a Squamish Hospital Regional District. In all these meetings, our audit reports were brought forward as well, by the way. We had a presentation at the hospital district meeting from Dr. Cranston, and he's the lead on a project to try to get a CT scanner in Squamish. The CT scanner that's currently in Whistler, they're basically saying, after 10 years, you don't want to invest money in repairing it and upkeeping it, and it becomes outdated. And the one in Whistler is, I think, 12 years old, still functional, still working, but they would like an additional one in Squamish, and B, recognizing that this one might not be replaced anytime soon, it's even that much more important to have one at Squamish General Hospital. And the Dr. Cranston, made a very good presentation in terms of it's now considered a basic tool in diagnostics for doctors, and sort of referenced a couple of cases which could have gone significantly better for the patient had they CT scans in Squamish. So, and instead of sending people down to Lionsgate, it just doesn't make sense. So there's a big push to get a CT scanner. They're asking the board for advocacy, and all of us for advocacy to VCH. What they're attempting to do is to raise the funds to purchase and house the CT scanner, and housing it itself is also a fair cost to it. But this group is looking to the hospital district board, hospital associations, all that sort of thing, other forms of raising funds to purchase and house the CT scanner. What they would like to do is apply pressure on VCH to pay for the operations of the CT scanner once it's installed. And at this point, we haven't received that approval or support. It's about 1.5 million to purchase, and it's about 500,000 to house. So again, they're going to push for raising those funds locally, and we'll see what we can do with VCH operationally. A couple other meetings. I had a meeting with Karen Love, the chair of the Arts Council, and I don't have her name in front of me, I'm afraid. Another new board member, very passionate, both of them. They've got lots of great ideas that they would like to share with all of us. They would like to talk about public art is very much on their radar. They feel they can get funding for public art for our downtown to lead us into the next phase of our downtown improvement. They're very interested in the roundabout. They'd like to know more about that. So yeah, other pop-up and public art installments downtown is of great interest to them. They'd like to talk to us about that. They're very keen on finding a home where they can also do sessions. This is nothing new. You know, I discussed with them again the men's shed, looking for a home as well. And of course, conversation came up about our property on the other side of the barn, which I again said we haven't had that visioning exercise yet, which I would like to in the very near future. Be able to sit down and start visioning what that green space can look like in the future. But they're very keen to find a home, and they also feel there's funding available to them. And she sent me some of the screenshots of some of the funding available, where if they were to partner up with other community groups and show other community use, there are funds out there. So they're very keen to talk to us about that as well as a couple of events they'd like to run, like the art hop they did last year, and depending on not if, but when we are able to gather in a different form, what they can do in a downtown sort of party event as well, whenever that might be. So they had lots of ideas. We had a great chat. They can take it back and formulate them a little bit more. I told them as soon as they are ready to let me know, and we would put them on a council agenda so that we can have a bigger conversation all together. But a new board, very keen, very passionate, is really, really good to see. And I think a lot of their initiatives would be really welcome during these times, you know, for mental health and social gathering. So that was them. My meetings with VCH and Sea to Sky and MLAs and MPs and all that sort of thing has been very much vaccine based. As you know, Squamish's transmission numbers went up fairly substantially, so they're getting a community vaccine clinic as well as we speak. I believe it's predominantly AstraZeneca. Whistler, you know, they work most of their population as well as through our residents that work in Whistler through their clinic. They have AstraZeneca as well available at some of the pharmacies. And because they did the community clinic, it feels like, and I could be wrong, but it felt like to me that it's fairly available, the AstraZeneca at Nestor's and other pharmacies, compared to what I'm hearing down in the city, where people call around from pharmacy to pharmacy in the hopes to find some extra doses. I went last Thursday. I called on Wednesday. They're like, yep, we got 15 doses tomorrow, or whatever it was, the number was. And I was in 8:40 in the morning, and it was quick and easy. So I think I'm not sure if all our residents know, but I just wanted to point that out. But that's been very much the conversation with VCH. I've asked of VCH, you know, I made the case for the fact that we have X amount of residents that have been vaccinated through the age-based rollout. We have X amount that have been vaccinated through the community, you know, clinic in Whistler, AstraZeneca, et cetera, et cetera. Are they tracking, and would they be able to provide us with a number that shows, you know, what percentage of our population is vaccinated at this point? I've had a number of people ask me that, and it would be an interesting thing to note. But so that's been the conversation with VCH and MLAs, MPs. Also on with ministers, you know, talking about the travel restrictions. And this is, as you know, was the big topic of conversation last week. I forwarded you, and I'm sure you've seen the press release that we put out with all the Sea to Sky corridor communities, reluctantly, respectfully asking visitors to stay in their own communities for the next few weeks. You know, we sent that message to the public. We sent messages to Minister Farnworth and Mr. Osborne and others to say, you know, we have concerns over the way the health regions were combined in the travel restrictions, combining the two biggest regions of cases together and not allowing them to go to the Okanagan or to the island. It's just sort of generating traffic, pushing them all up the Sea to Sky corridor to our area. So we get that there was, you know, logistical reasons for combining the two health regions, the movement of people and goods. I get that, but we've been on them about the messaging around it and how it's been confusing, and how, you know, this weekend wasn't bad because it wasn't very good weather, but how much traffic we're seeing and what kind of visitation we're seeing and the impact to the backcountry. So we've been very strong in that message, and I'm actually on a meeting that got called late in the day yesterday. So I'm on a meeting at 5 o'clock with Minister Farnworth and Minister Osborne to talk about the restrictions. So I'm open to any input that you might have if you like me, and we can talk about it offline if you like, but if there's anything you'd like me to bring to those meetings, let me know. That's my report. Any council reports? Councilor Craddock.
Thanks very much, Mayor Richmond. Just a quick update from Pemberton Valley Diking District meeting on Thursday. And it was brought up by Mr. Seema earlier that the Diking District is looking at exploring putting a sediment trap on Pemberton Creek. They've noticed, I've brought this up before, quite a bit of sediment coming down this year. They're not too sure what it's caused by, and they haven't gone up to the headwaters to see if there's been a slide or anything in that area that's causing the problem. The sediment removal in the Lillooet River is now complete. Excuse me. And the sales of that material have been quite good this year, bringing in somewhere north of $100,000. So that's good news. So that helps pay for the cost of getting it out of there. It was noted that this year the river levels are historically low. And they say that's caused by the fact that their snow level under 4,000 feet is non-existent right now. And going back to your note, Mayor Richmond, the fire season is actually quite dry for this time of the year because of the lack of snow. The other thing they're looking at doing this year is purchasing 5 level loggers to track the efficiency of the sediment removal. So when they apply for funding, they can actually show how much sediment is coming back. I think if people have been around the river at all, you can see that the channels they clear out one year, by the time next year comes around, it's already completely full, and actually more going in it than there was the previous year. So lots of work to be done. The Arn Canal project is still hoping to be done this summer, but they're going through another design change on it at the present time. So probably the next meeting, I'll have a report back in that. And that's it for the Diking District. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Nova, go ahead.
Just want to say that while the end result wasn't what we hoped for, I think that village staff and yourself did an excellent job of advocating for Sea to Sky Soils with a letter of support and a delegate at a very last minute. And really appreciate that.
Yeah, and I don't know if everybody's aware, but the Sea to Sky Soils board, Zero Waste Committee voted 6-4 to go with the other RFP applicant. So they didn't get the contract for that waste. I spoke with the operator that afternoon, and he's very positive, very hopeful, and feels that they're going to have to cut back on staff. Unquestionably, they're going to have to cut back their operations. But he's a positive go-getter type, and he feels he could rebuild what he's got. But it's definitely a major hit for them.
Yeah.
Any other council reports? Go ahead, Councilor Antonelli.
Yeah, I attended the Howe Sound Biosphere meeting. That was interesting. They have some interesting coral structures that they're looking at protecting from recreation and fishing and that kind of thing. Overall, I'd say it's I would say the Village of Pemberton work is not terribly connected to that organization, but maybe it's something we can work on in the future. I also attended a Tourism Pemberton meeting. Not too much new there. They're working on their projects. They're putting up the Share the Road signs again, and they're working on their backcountry outhouses. There is some debate whether they're going to service the outhouses with toilet paper. Yeah, that's about it.
When do they see the outhouses being in place?
I don't know the exact date. I know that they just got the designs completed with the architect.
Good. That's good news. Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, well, good. Correspondence for action. Anna Scott, Director of Pemberton Animal Welfare Society. So this was one of the groups that was very much considered when we changed our funding opportunities and connected with Area C region from the SLRD to create the Pemberton District Initiative Fund. Ms. Scott has missed the intake, but I would recommend that her application go back to PVIS and the PDIF fund for funding, unless anybody else would like to make another suggestion. Councillor Scott.
Yeah, is there still funds available for this year, Mayor Richmond?
There's funds left in the arts, in the arts and culture, or culture and recreation. What do we call that fund, Sheena?
Art, recreation, arts and culture.
Recreation, arts and culture. There's some funds left in there for one-time funding, and I think what would probably happen is we'd recommend pause to apply for ongoing funding through PDIF. But there are currently funds available for one-time funding.
And that I asked that question so that if we refer it back to PVIS, and we wouldn't be looking at any funds from the village, but I certainly, after talking to her, I certainly understood the situation where there was a complete turnover of staff and people writing for the applications at that time. So they do need funding. It was just the opportunity just was lost at that time. So if you feel there's funds available for her to apply under PVIS, it's fine. If not, I would suggest we do something through any funds that are available through Village of Pemberton.
We have more available through the PDIF to support her, and obviously I'm not going to speak for the PVIS committee, but my instinct would be they would be happy to consider that.
So would you like a motion to move this letter forward to PVIS for consideration?
Yes, please.
Second.
Ms. Fraser, go ahead.
Well, I was wondering if we send the letter to PVIS, PVIS will just have to send it back to them, asking them to fill out an application. So I'm wondering if it would be better if we were to send a letter to them advising what the process is, so that they can come to PVIS right away with an actual completed application.
I'm pretty sure that's exactly what Councillor Craddock's motion was.
Okay, all right. Sorry,
I'm
I
kidding.
misunderstood. I understood that the letter was to be forwarded to PVIS.
I'm kidding. It wasn't in that detail. Councillor Craddock, you good with that?
100%. I just want to work with good volunteers in the community. So yes, I'll move that motion. Thank you for enhancing it for me.
Second by Councillor
Sorry.
Noble. Further discussion? Any opposed? Motion carries. There are 5 correspondence for information. Would anybody like to pull anything out?
Receive and file.
Second. Any discussion? Any opposed? Motion carries. So we're gonna go right through question period before we recess. So decision on late business, no notice of motion. Question period. So for those that are in attendance who wish to ask questions, please click on the raise hand feature. This will notify staff that you would like to ask a question, and staff will unmute your microphone when it is your turn to speak. Please be reminded that questions directly related to items discussed during this meeting are permitted.
There are no raised hands, Mayor Richmond.
Ms. Noel is okay. Okay. Then I will look for a motion to go in camera. Councillor Noble, seconded by Councillor Zant. Any opposed? Motion carries. So let's stop the recording for a moment.